All right, proceed. My love.
I've been given instructions. So we've been talking about the subject of becoming aware of our sin and how that affects our relationship with God. But most of us are not aware of how much of our sin is created because of what we believe to be love of self. So I think what I would like to do with you this morning is just talk to you about what you think love of self is, and we'll compare it to what God thinks love of self is. Sound all right?
Sounds great.
Because oftentimes when we love ourselves, or when we say we're loving ourselves, what do we do? So let's look at our own definition of love of self. What kind of things do we do when we're saying we love ourselves?
Take care of our bodies physically.
Sorry, you take care of your body, yes? So when you say take care of your body, you're looking for body comfort, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you want to
Massages,
be comfortable.
Well, I was just thinking eat healthy, sleep enough.
Okay, eat healthy, yeah. So body comforts include sort of eating, how you eat, how you sleep, yeah. Exercise. Yeah. Okay. So we view that as loving yourself, yeah. What else?
Prioritize yourself, like be the center of everything.
Okay, so you become, should we say we become self-centered?
Self-centered.
You don't center like that, do you?
No.
You go ER.
Yeah, but it is
acceptable.
It is true in Australia.
It's a missing. It's okay. Yeah.
We spell it RE.
Yeah, we spell it like that. So that's English.
So
You don't
it's-
have English.
The
American.
So one time Jesus spelling is
Actually,
technically
right.
correct.
Okay, so we become a bit self-centered, don't we? We go, well, and to some extent you will be, you have to guide through the use of your free will. You need to choose what you're going to do for your life and make decisions about your own life and things like that, don't we? And so generally what we have a tendency though to do when we say we're loving ourselves is we have a tendency to put a higher priority on ourselves than on anyone else, right? In other words, you can already see a bit of a problem with that, can't you? Because yesterday we were talking about equality, and here we're saying I'm putting a bit higher priority on my own life rather than on having equal lives with others. And so that straight away means that I'm already getting out of shape with equality, doesn't it? What else do we do?
Financial wealth.
Sorry, manage your wealth.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so finances. And how do we do that? How do we generally treat our finances? We put some sort of away for what we call a rainy day. And then, of course, the rainy day fund has a tendency to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because we get more and more fear about our rainy day. And we're worried now it's a rainy month. And after a while it becomes a rainy year. And we're stashing stuff away. So we do that, yes. But also we do things like engaging in wealth creation strategies that don't actually create anything in real life. So an example of that is like we do something like digital currency, Bitcoin or something. These kind of currencies use a lot of resources of the earth, but they don't actually create anything. They don't create a building and they don't create a public infrastructure and they don't create anything. They're just there so we can get the money and we can go and create for ourselves. So it's a very selfish pursuit, actually, many of them. But this is what we call looking after ourselves, right?
Can we say gaining wealth at any cost?
Yeah. Wealth without considering cost to others. And cost to others and the environment.
Yeah.
So an example of that with regard to things like Bitcoin most people are not aware that there's server farms around the world that are just being created to manage the blockchain. And they are chewing up power, like huge amounts of power every single day. There are some server farms now in the world that are like 7,000 servers in one area, and they're chewing like what you would normally use to power a small city is used to just power that. Right? And in the USA, you have thousands of these, and they're all locked away in specially controlled environments with all this security, because different people use them, and some of them are government institutions and so forth use them, and they're all locked away, and there's all this security surrounding them, but there's also all this power and energy and time and effort going into creating them. And some of them, and with AI now, some of them are so large that one AI program runs on one entire farm of like 10,000 servers. Right? So one IO program like ChatGPT or something like that just runs on like tens of thousands of servers, and all it's doing is creating all of these things that are actually not true. They're AI, they're generated. They're not actually real things. And it's interesting, we were approached some time ago by somebody saying, oh, I've come up with a really good idea. I want to do an AI Jesus, right? Where I get all of your videos and we put them into an AI, and then the AI can answer questions about other things that you haven't talked about. Is that kind of
It doesn't understand God or
Correct.
spirituality or the law of
correct? And it's very dependent on the programmer
Yeah.
as to what it's going to understand, of course. And yeah, so this whole way the world is going in this direction is just creating more and more unreality, and people are investing their finances in it because everybody gets on the bandwagon very quickly, and there's lots of money to be had if you get in early. And so people get into it not considering the outcome or the cost to others or the environment. And in the case of something like any spiritual discussion, the cost spiritually, remember our spiritual sins are the worst sins we can commit. The cost that it's going to have to their long-term future, including their spirit future, not considered at all.
Like not feeling your feelings, like trying to just put on a facade and get other people to like you.
Yeah, so let's call that emotional comfort.
Yeah.
There's another way most people think they love themselves, isn't it? Yeah, emotional comfort. So what is emotional comfort? What it is when I've got the option of feeling something that's really hard and I'm going to have to cry, and then I've got the option of tuning out of that, what do? I love myself, so I'm going to tune out of that. Right? When I've got the option of having to deal with something emotionally myself, or I can go along and get somebody else to commiserate with me about emotion, what do I choose to do? Go along and commiserate with somebody else. In other words, dump my emotion on them, as if they don't have enough problems of their own. So I'm just going to dump my problems on them, and hopefully they'll have a feeling like an addiction that they want to help me. And then of course, we both come away feeling comfortable now, but nothing's really been properly dealt with. Is it?
Positive thoughts only.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Emotional comfort, think positive thoughts only.
Yeah, that's right. So that is intellectual comfort. And what intellectual comfort really is the desire to not be bothered by things that might trigger you emotionally. So what you do is you choose to only examine the areas of life that bring you some kind of pleasure, but don't face the truth about anything that might not bring you that pleasure. So an example of that is, what's the worst problem on earth?
Fear.
No, I mean the worst real problem. So forget about emotions, I'm talking about actual physical.
Earth changes?
No.
Children.
Children's the worst problem. There's 200 million of them dying every year. Every year. So now let's compare children with COVID. How many died from COVID per year?
Sorry, from what?
COVID.
COVID. COVID-19. How many people died every year?
He's got to not say that.
Which year?
Sorry, I just remembered. Yeah.
No, I'm allowed to say what I want.
I know. That's right.
Because I just said that,
Yeah.
this video is going to be banned from YouTube. But anyway.
Yeah.
How many died from the... About 1 million a year. How many children are dying every year? 200 million. And how much time did everybody spend on COVID? Their whole thinking and everything. How much time are we spending on solving the problem of 200 million children dying every year? Hardly any at all. In fact, we're calling it the women's right to choose, or in the case of abortion, or we're calling it, the sorry effective miscarriage, or we're calling it, a lovely IVF program that causes, actually the deaths of many, many children before they're born, that are all little souls that end up in the spirit world, that do not have a life on earth. And then, of course, you've got the 50 million or so children that are dying before the age of 5 every year from malnutrition, right? And none of us want to face it, how big a problem it is, right? And so what we do is we ignore it. That's what we call intellectual and emotional comfort. Makes sense? So instead of seeing the problem and recognize the problem and having to feel about the problem, we just ignore them. We do that with the environment as well. We're like, most of us, for years and years and years, most people have been what I would call climate deniers, because the reality is a lot of the changes that are happening on the earth are not happening because of climate change. They're actually happening because we're destroying the environment purposefully. We are meat eating, who is destroying large amounts of the environment. So we'd rather eat meat, emotional comfort, body comfort, than we would deal with the fact that actually it's destroying the environment. And we've been doing this for years and years and years, and we just ignore it, right? And this is the problem, is we keep ignoring problems, right? And the reason why we ignore them a lot of times is because we personally feel we can't do anything about them, which is not actually true, but we personally feel we can't. And so what we do is we want to stay in a state where we're happy. And so what we do is we ignore the problems that we face on earth. And we call this loving yourself. Right? So it's self-delusion actually, but because in the end, like, you can see that if humans keep doing this, we're going to end up with an environment that barely any of us can live in. Right? And yet the majority of us also feel that as long as I've been comfortable in my country or in my life, I'm not really concerned about how other people feel in their life or in their country or in the future. People, unborn children who are yet to come to this world, how is their life going to be? We don't consider these things very much. They don't even invade our thoughts very often, these kind of things, because most of us have also learned that we get so involved in our own life and caring for our own life and making our own life comfortable that we forget that a lot of our comfort is at the expense of other people's comfort. Right? And we call it loving ourselves, caring for ourselves, but it's not caring for ourselves really. It's really selfishness.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned that they're going to ban the video. Can we just stop and then start recording?
No, I don't care about that.
Oh, okay. I thought just...
No, it's
Yeah, sorry, I just suddenly remembered.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have interrupted.
Okay, so can you see already, and we could go on for a while here, couldn't we, listing the different things that we do, that we call, personal comfort. So an example of that is I'm wealthy enough to hire a nanny or wealthy enough to hire a house cleaner, but I don't, I'm trying to screw down their wage as much as possible for my own comfort. But that's not for their comfort. They still need a wage, a living wage, or something where they can just live comfortably too. But I don't think about their comfort, I'm just thinking about my comfort. And so I'm finding somebody who will do the work I want them to do that relieves my feelings of needing comfort. And I do this in the guise of loving myself, but in the process, the person that I'm having this interaction with financially is actually in a worse financial situation as a result. And, you know, if you think about that, then obviously, again, financial decisions that cost others and the environment, but are not considering how it costs them, right? So, anything else you can think of?
I just did a whole bunch of hard emotional work, and therefore I deserve a reward.
Okay, yes, like,
Especially
so what should we call that? What should we call that? Reward for good behaviour. And most of these rewards usually we're not considering the cost of them. So we often don't consider the cost even to our own body, but if we do consider it to our own body, then we don't consider the cost to other people. So in the case of the chocolate industry, we're not considering every cheap bit of chocolate I buy. The world chocolate industry has gotten most of that chocolate from people who earn less than $1 a day, right? And in fact, to get one bar of chocolate requires a harvest of an entire tree of cocoa, right? A cocoa tree. And those cocoa trees are being planted en masse where environments are being destroyed en masse, you know, so that and these have to grow in places where generally there are rainforests and so forth, and so all the rainforests are cleared, burnt, and then all these cocoa trees are planted. And then even though that has all happened, the very people who do all this very hard work earn $1 a day, right? And so really the chocolate should cost us $100 a bar, right? But because the average person probably wouldn't buy it if it was $100 a bar, right? And if it was $100 a bar, it'd be more fair to the people who are doing this harvesting. But because the people who are buying it want it to be $5 a bar, then you have all of these industries that are pushing down the prices of the people who are actually doing the development of it. And we're not considering that. We're just going, let's get a reward for our good behaviour. Chocolate feels good, makes, you know, fires off those endorphins in the brain and makes me feel like, almost as good as sex, right? And then, and so,
I don't know.
sorry, for a woman.
No, they're not having good sex.
They're not having also the cost of sex is
It's free.
But anyway, so but we're doing this in terms of reward, right? And so we're giving ourselves a reward, but not considering the cost of the reward. So you think of almost everybody gets up in the morning in most developed countries and they have like either some tea or some coffee. And tea and coffee have both had the same kind of industries as chocolate, in the sense that they are generally done in very, very poor countries, and generally they are all destroying huge amounts of the environment, and generally there has been mass extinctions of animals and plants and everything because of that one substance. So that one so-called one substance, which is just what we call it a natural substance, there's no harm in it, but actually there's huge amounts of harm that we're not considering. We're not considering the harm to the people who are harvesting it, in the sense that they're earning very, very poor wages. We're not considering the harm to the environment. We're not considering the destruction of the animals, you know, of everything in nature. And we're not considering the en masse destruction of variety in nature, because what we're doing is we're clearing major areas of forest and putting in one plant. Now that would be different than if you planted a cocoa tree in your backyard along with all your other trees, wouldn't it? Because there's some variety there at least, if you planted a coffee tree in your backyard. But then you'd have to harvest the thing. And for most people, that's just too much effort. We want the poor people to do that. The people who are prepared to work for $1 a day because that's their only option at the moment, that they're the people we're happy to have do that. Right? And these are all ways in which particularly those of us that are thinking we're loving ourselves are actually sinning. In the moment, we're sinning. And if you think of the attitudes behind all that, or you could say the spiritual beliefs behind all of that, they are quite seriously flawed. Because if you consider, would you work for $1 a day growing a cocoa plant that you had to clear acres and acres of forest for, and would you do that every day of your life for $1 a day? Now, if you wouldn't, then why are you asking somebody else to? Right? There's an inequality there, isn't there? Now, if you would, well, go ahead and do it then. But if you wouldn't, then stop being hypocritical about asking someone else to do it. You follow? Yeah. And it's all for often substances that we call reward substances. So you get up in the morning, what do you need to get yourself going? A cup of coffee. You know? For many people, that's their breakfast, ironically, now. And then, you know, lunchtime, cup of coffee. When I was working really hard where I wouldn't sleep for 4 days, it was a cup of coffee keeping me up at night so I could keep working. But for most people, it's a comfort thing, isn't it? So we don't consider that the reward for good behaviour. What's the price of it? The price for that, Gene?
So what are some of the practical, I guess, and I guess this is where the conversation might be going, what are some of the practical ways we can confront our spiritual sin in our day-to-day lives?
Well, firstly, we need to see what we do. Can you see? So what I'm trying to do here is make a list, and what I would suggest each person makes a personal list. This is what I do thinking that I'm loving myself. This is what I do thinking I'm treating myself well, right? So firstly, that's what you do. You look at your list of all the things you think are good for you, all the things you think are good. And then the second thing you would need to do if you really wanted to be honest with yourself is investigate whether they're good for everyone else. Does that make sense? So if we took it as our coffee, for example, we go, okay, I think it's good. I like it. I don't see any harm in it. Right? Is it good for everyone else? So let's look at it. We go, firstly, we're having to clear acres and acres and acres, like literally millions of acres of forest in order to have our coffee plantations that are big enough to supply the world's demand for coffee. Right? Is it good for the environment that that's happening? Is it good for the environment that you get rid of all the trees and replace it, all the different types of, hundreds of thousands of different types of trees and plants, and animals and birds and other creatures, and you plant coffee that does not support any of those things? So in other words, all of those things that were there before are now all gone. And they're gone forever. If we're not careful, they'll be gone forever. You know, there was this, we were watching a documentary, or a guy speaking wasn't it, a few days ago. He was talking about what happened in Brazil. I think it was in Rio de Janeiro. And when people started liking coffee, which started in I think it was about the 14th century or something like that. In Rio de Janeiro, there's a lovely hill, and there's now a hill of forest that goes up to the image of myself on the top of the mountain. And there's a hill of forest, and that forest looks like it's been there for years, and it's actually called a pristine forest, but it's not a pristine forest actually. In fact, there's barely any pristine forest left in the entire world at the moment. Anyway, this so-called pristine forest, in the 14th and 15th century, they cleared the entire hill. They had people working for nothing, going up, and many of them died doing it, of course, and they went up and they cleared the entire hill to plant coffee, right? And they actually planted coffee, but in the process of planting coffee, there was, with the forest, there was this whole heap of underground water that was getting stored in the forest. The forest was maintaining the water system of the planet and actually creating rainfall in the area. And what happened over a period of nearly 200 years, I think it was, and they eventually had a decline in the rainfall and the water in the ground to the point where now no water would come out of the ground at all over a period of 200 years. And so a couple of hundred years later, they realised this. And what they did then is they got rid of all the coffee, and then they had people going back into old remnant forests elsewhere, getting all the seedlings and seeds and everything from that forest and replanting the entire hill. And as you would expect, after replanting the entire hill and letting it generate for a couple of hundred years, the water system came back and the rainfall increased and everything else increased. Right? So they realised that, we clear it for one thing, and now even we don't get any water now as a result of it. And this kind of thing is happening all over the world, all over the world. In your country, there's these big bores that are being placed just for the sake of meat production. There's these big bores being drilled for water into artesian basins. And now, in the middle of your country, a number of your artesian basins are completely empty. Like, all the farmers in that location who were dependent on the bores before can't live there anymore. It's turned into a desert. Right? There's no water in the wells anymore, in the artesian wells, because we've taken all of that out, right, to produce fodder for cattle in those areas. So these areas, they had these huge cattle, what would you call them? In Australia we call them...
We call them farms, I think they might call them ranches.
Yeah, but they weren't ranches, they were,
Feedlots.
they're feedlots. So what they do is they bunch the cattle into these yards where there'll be 1,000 cattle in the space of an acre, and then they just feed them as much as they can feed them and stop them from moving around as much as possible, because that way they get fat very fast and you get this real fatty, soft beef that you can then eat, right? And so a lot of your countries become very dependent on, very large, as you know, steaks getting eaten every day. And so they've done all of this, and in the process they sucked out all of this water out of the ground. So now they are so concerned in your country that there are now these areas through the middle of your country where these artesian basins exist. Now many of them are becoming empty. Over 50% of them are empty. Now. So you know what they're doing now? They're offshoring your cattle feedlots to other countries that still have artesian basins that they can suck water out of. Now, does that sound like a great long-term solution to you? It's not a long-term solution. But see, the body comfort of, when I eat meat, I feel full. I solve some seemingly body problems by eating meat, with the protein, not because, and that's only because we haven't addressed certain emotions. But anyway, and we do that in justification, but substantially it's ruining the planet, right? Substantially, and yet we don't consider it. So if my reward food is a good steak once a week, you can see that result. So in answer to your question, Eugene, firstly, what we've got to do is look at what we do. Secondly, we need to investigate the effects of what we do fully. So investigate the effects of what you do fully. Then you can start to see that there must be sin in it. Once you can work out, there must be sin in it, now we can go looking for the sin. What type of sin is in it, right? So let's look at some of the types of sin just in what we've listed, shall we? In terms of what are the spiritual sins we're committing when we when we do these things that are so-called loving myself. And then what we want to do is go, what does it look like to love yourself properly? What does that look like? All right. So let's look at body comfort. Is there any problem with you trying to get some body comfort?
No, but if it's at the expense of others, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's at the expense of others' bodies or their feelings, then there is a problem, isn't there? Yeah. So
We're doing it in addiction, like if we're eating or sleeping or exercising to escape
correct.
emotions, because sometimes those are coping strategies.
Correct. So in other words, we're trying to avoid specific emotions by doing it. So many of you now know, don't you, that if you exercise to a fairly large degree, you'll get these endorphins kicking off in your brain, right? And you'll feel good. But why don't you normally feel good just with normal exercise? Or why does it have to be exercise? Why can't you get out and dig some holes for some trees? Or why does it have to be go to the gym? You know, like now, all of us are capable, those of us who are physically able, are all capable of improving the environment through our exercise. But do we consider doing that? Most times not, no. What we do instead is we go, let's go to the gym where I've got power machines, which are all using power, and I get on these treadmills or something, and I get on these machines, and very few of the machines are like machines that will last hundreds of years, particularly when it comes to the treadmills and the running machines and all that. Most of them are not human driven, are they? They're driven by a motor that is using energy. So I'm actually using the world's energy to get my own system going, whereas I could actually choose to do a different form of exercise, couldn't I, that actually contributes to the world's energy or contributes to something in the world, such as like growing trees or growing food. Or you imagine this every day, instead of us doing our 2 hours or 1 hour of exercise, where we go running around doing nothing else other than running around, or we go, you know, pumping some iron and nothing else than pumping some iron or whatever, or we go running on a treadmill with nothing else but running on a treadmill. Imagine if while we were doing the exercise, there was actually a benefit to the environment. And you had, let's say in America, you got what, 350 million or 20 million or something people? You imagine if you had 320 million people who were doing exercise, instead of them going to a gym, they now went to a planting place or a
Helping people move.
help people, you know, whatever is going to benefit something else while they're getting exercise.
Picking up litter.
You know, running messages. I don't know, something that's going to benefit at least one other person other than yourself, right? The reality is that you can do a lot of things that improve your body comfort, or particularly when it comes to exercise, that actually improve other people's lives at the same time. But we don't even think of it because we're self-centered, I suppose, isn't it? We don't even think of it. And also we're not thinking of the spiritual sin of doing something that uses the world's resources without contributing anything back to them. Right? So we're not considering that.
Is it worth also mentioning the spiritual sin against sort of humility? That is actually a spiritual sin, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we are doing something to avoid our feelings, as we mentioned yesterday, we're going against the design of our soul. We're shutting down what should be flowing.
Yeah,
and
we'll
that
talk
is...
more about that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
I've got it.
Sorry.
I want to get in my head of everybody.
Yeah. That's all good. I'm kind of in my gear, so I'm like, I just...
Now, let's just go through, shall we, some of these spiritual sins. Right? So let's look at the body comfort exercise issue. The fact that I'm not considering anybody else in my exercise means what? With regard to love, what does it mean? So let's look at the love issue with regard to exercise. If I loved the environment, what would I do with my exercise? I would make sure my exercise contributes to the environment, wouldn't I? In one way or the other. Right? So So by using the environment but not contributing to any of it, I'm not loving the environment. So loving the environment, of course, is a less sin than, in terms of if you don't love the environment, than loving people. But it's still a sin. There are many people in the hells of the spirit world for that reason, because they didn't love the environment. Right? So, I'm not loving the environment. The fact is too that I'm not loving others, because I'm just doing it for myself and not involving or helping others in the exercise of my body. So an example of that would be, let's go and help some garbage collectors for the day, or let's go or for an hour even. Just do something that's going to be of benefit to the environment and to other people, help them in their lives, right? The fact that I'm not considering that means that I'm committing a sin of omission. And the sin of omission is about love. And the love-based sins are the very biggest ones that we're committing. They're the very biggest, right? Bigger than any other. Right? What about truth? In what regard am I not facing some truth here? With regard to this one problem of body comfort. When do you sleep well?
When I faced everything during the day.
Yeah, when you deal with your own feelings about everything during the day, you can sleep well. When you don't sleep well, it's because you didn't face all of your own feelings during the day, and you're worried, and you're stressed, and you're not dealing with things properly. That's why you don't sleep well. So instead of being focused on getting some extra sleep and maybe popping a pill to get the extra sleep, how about dealing with the problems you face during the day? That would be good. So the truth is, when I face my own problems, so face own problems, I am now not dumping my problems on others or the environment. Isn't that the truth? Right? So if I have problems sleeping, then this is what I need to do, face my own problems. Like, stop using substances or using exercise to get sleep, when actually what I need to do is solve my problems to get some sleep. Deal with my problems. Right? So that's a truth that I'm not facing. And so I am actually living out of harmony with the truth while I'm trying to get sleep at any cost. Right? And so many people, with regard to sleep, they do things like, take medicine, don't they, to get some sleep. When they haven't had sleep for a few days, it's sort of like, oh, this is tiring now. I can hardly function anymore. So what I'm going to do is take some Valium or something that knocks me out. And so now I'm also contributing to an industry that's supporting me detuning from my feelings. So is that, as Mary just mentioned, is that humble? What's humble? Making the choice to feel everything of my own emotions. Right? Rather than to seek comfort to avoid them, in my body to avoid them. And also, this applies to the intellectual comfort and the emotional comfort, doesn't it? Right? So I'm not being humble. So I'm actually also failing that test of sin. Yeah? I'm sinning in that regard. What about faith? How is this problematic? Or this, or what I eat, problematic when it comes to faith? Does what you eat give you comfort, really? What have you found?
Short term.
But let's say you got a problem and you go, I'd like to avoid the problem, so I'll eat some chips, or I'll eat some chocolate, or have a coffee and calm myself down, or G myself up, or you could go further than that, couldn't you, and actually take drugs as well, couldn't you, like marijuana or heavier drugs or alcohol or whatever, all for the sake of making you just feel comfortable in yourself. But does it actually make you comfortable?
No.
No. Like anybody who really knows what's going on with their body would realise that the more you eat bad food, the more uncomfortable you actually feel. But it's just a different kind of uncomfortable than emotional uncomfortable, right? So, and it's a different kind of comfortable than intellectual uncomfortable. So what we end up doing is we're going, I'm going to like make my body comfortable, and that will suppress my emotions and calm down my intellect. And a lot of people will even have coffee for that reason, to calm themselves down, even though it's a stimulant, right? Oftentimes, ironically, a stimulant causes you to think about a lot of other things rather than the thing you need to feel about, right? So all of those things are not to do with having faith that you can resolve your own problems. You don't have to avoid them. There's also another faith, and that is avoiding your problems just leads to more problems.
Yes.
Right? Most of us, when we're avoiding our problems, are not honouring that truth. We're thinking, oh, avoid this problem. Oh, tomorrow I have another problem, avoid that one. You know, next day avoid that one. And we're thinking that's going to make our life better. But has that been your experience? Hasn't the problem avoided, just built up slowly over time to the point where now it's right in your face and there's nothing you can do about it and there's nothing you can do to get away from it and you've got to deal with it anyway. So isn't it better to have faith in the economy and just deal with it right at the beginning rather than deal with it when you're forced to right at the end? So you can see our faith is corrupt as well. Just these things, these little things, it can show us where we've got our problems. Right? So in answer to Jean's question, firstly what you do is you list all the things you think are good. And then you investigate them to see whether they are good for everybody, not just you. And then thirdly, after you've worked out, oh, they're not good for everybody, then must be a problem. So what's my problem thinking they're good? I've got to work out what my corrupted faith is, what my corrupted beliefs are that cause me to believe that these things are good when they're obviously not. Right? Then I'm becoming aware. See, the point of this was to become aware. Once I start becoming aware, then I can start to get to the point of working through why I want the thing, what my addiction is, and all these other things. But if I'm not aware that I'm actually committing sin with these very basic issues, then how will I ever get deeper and get to the point where I'm repentant for it? I'm never going to. And so I'll continue, if I'm unaware, I will continue in my actions. And then what will happen is I'll be praying to God for love and not understanding why I'm not getting any, right? Not receiving any. And I'm going to be thinking, I'm so sincere. I'm so sincere. I almost am crying every time I'm praying for love. I'm so sincere, right? But frequently we're not looking at our sins, so therefore we are not sincere, right? And if we're not sincere, then the law, God's law about love and how it's transmitted and how it's received, is completely dependent on our sincerity. And if the law is measuring us as insincere, then of course there is no response. There's not going to be any response. And as I said a few days ago, this is the reason why most people don't continue to receive God's love. Because they're not prepared to go through the self-examination process that's required to see your own sin or become at least aware of it, you know. Once you're aware, you can now start working on why you want it, can't you? Once you're aware. But if you're not aware, you're going to think, I've got no problem. Oh, that's not a problem. So, you know, when I was raised with the first group, I think it was in Brussels, was it? Or Austria, I can't remember, about toilet paper, wiping your bottom with toilet paper. Everybody thought I was an idiot, right? So that was a general projection coming from the audience. What are we talking about toilet paper for? I came for a spiritual discussion about my relationship. And now you're talking about how I wipe my bum, and that's not connected. But it is connected, because the choices being made are unloving to something, right? And if it's unloving to something, then of course, unless we see how unloving they are, we're not going to make changes. It was interesting in Canada, the very first subject we raised there was pets.
Yeah.
Man, it went on for 2 hours. It was much longer than 2 hours, I think. Everybody was pretty challenged about pets, the pet discussion. And nobody was wanting to even look at how unloving it is to have a pet. Nobody was wanting to even look at it, right? And also what it does to the environment and the relationship between the animals you think you love versus the animals that you don't care about, and all of this kind of thing. People say, I care about animals, but when you really boil it down, they only care about their cat and their dogs, and they don't really care about the squirrels and the chipmunks and the birds and the other animals, and they don't demonstrate any care for any of these other animals. And when there's a priority between their own pet and the other animals, it's always their own pet first. And an example of that is the dogs eat meat. Every dog you have is like another human eating some more meat. And where does that meat come from? It comes from other animals that you don't love as much. They have to die for the sake of the animal you love more, right? Now, it doesn't make any sense to me that you grow, a whole society is growing thousands, tens of millions of animals that are domesticated for the sake of other animals that are domesticated, but not for any other sake, not for any other animal. In fact, in most countries, when a bear comes and eats your cow, or a lion comes and eats your cow, what do? Shoot the thing, right? Because the cow's more important than the other animal, right? And so there's another example, but you can present all of that to a group of people, but when the emotions are so tied up in it, when the sin's so tied up in it, they go, what? You're telling us we've got to get rid of our pets? And like, how do we do that? And you can't give them away and you can't let them free because that would also destroy the environment. So what are you going to have to do? Right? You're going to have to get rid of them properly because you created them just for this sinful purpose. You're going to have to deal with your own sins somehow. How are you going to do that? Now, when the average person hears that, so if I want to deal with my sin immediately on this problem and I want to deal with the effect, I'm going to have to kill my pets. Well, yes, substantially that's true. Right? That's true.
Isn't that also a sin to kill the pets?
What's worse, that your pet destroys hundreds of other animals a year, or you get rid of the one animal so that it doesn't destroy hundreds of other animals a year? And it's an animal you created just for you, just for your selfish reasons. It's not something that lives in the environment, like a wolf or something like that, that has to make its way in the environment. It's something that you're supporting. What's worse? What's worse, is it better that hundreds of animals die every year just for the sake of your pet? So in Australia, it's well documented that around 186 animals per annum die every year from a pet cat. So, sorry?
Yeah, one cat.
One cat. In Australia, there's over 20 million, I think it is, pet cats. So if you multiply 186 by 20 million, you'll get billions of animals are dying every year, native animals are dying every year for the sake of people's pet cats. We've got an imbalance here. The problem is I'm putting my cat above 186 other animals. That's what I'm doing. There's no equality there. And of course the cat thinks it's better because you think it's better. And when I say what I mean by that is the cat feels your emotions. Your emotions are, my cat's better, and my cat's more important to me than those other animals. And so the cat, on purpose, goes and gets those other animals, kills them, brings them to your doorstep, doesn't even eat them, and just leaves them there, reminding you of how much more important the cat is to you than these other animals. You're happy to see them even brought to your doorstep, right? And you go, oh, good cat. Most people do that, particularly if the animal being brought to them is a mouse or something. Yeah? I don't want to get involved in a conversation. So you see how inflammatory it is that we don't even want to look at our sin. We don't even want to look at it. It's like I say something like that and everybody's up in arms and what do I do? And you know, what's the best thing to do? Well, you've got to work out what's the best thing to do. Is the reality. You're going to have to do that because you created this thing, and the people who are having the pets have created that sin. You need to sort out your problem, and you need to solve it, and you need to solve it in a way that benefits everything. So, you know, everything possible to be benefited from needs to be benefited from. Now, in my feeling is if you've got to get rid of one animal of yours to save 186 animals of God's, right, then it would be a wise decision.
I was gonna support your statement.
Sorry?
I was gonna support your statement, just to let other people know that, another thing too, that I heard from, this film on YouTube that's free available for everyone about grounding.
Yeah.
They said that, most house pets usually have diseases when they live with human beings as opposed to when they're living in nature, just because of the grounding.
Correct?
And because of the condition
Condition of the human is what it's about. Yeah.
And
Yeah, and this is why many diseases that are coming about now are actually coming from domestic animals you eat. This is why they have such rigid rules about things like mad cow disease and other diseases like that. Because what's happening, actually happening there with like things like mad cow disease is they get a whole lot of offal and others, like they get meat from other animals that are being killed and they feed into the cows, right? And then people are eating that meat. So the cows, which are meant to be eating grass, obviously, are now eating meat. They're being fed as pellets, of course, right? Something that they don't recognise as meat, but it's still meat, it comes from meat. So you know, we've got, on Earth, most people got no idea where their food's coming from, no idea how unloving it is. The majority of food that you find in your supermarket is unloving in one way or the other. That's why the more you eat just natural food like fruit, vegetables, nuts, you know, the more you eat that, the more you do for the environment and also for yourself and your own health, of course. But you also do it for the environment as well, because you improve the environment as a result. All of those things that need to grow regularly in order to supply food and are not consuming the things that are growing to supply food, they're actually also helping in a lot of other ways. In I think the first group last week, we talked about how a peach tree or something, you know, how it benefits the environment while it's growing every year and it's abundant. And we were talking about the issue of abundance last week, a bit about how we don't believe in it. You know, that's why most people are worried about their finances, because they don't believe in abundance. But if you look at the things God's created, all of them focus around abundance. So a tree, for example, provides fruit, nuts, provides oxygen, it actually helps the soil regenerate as well while it's growing. It also helps the water, it transpires water. So actually most of the reasons why we've got things like global warming is because there's less and less transpiration occurring in the entire atmosphere. And the trees are like huge air conditioners for the planet. And we are destroying them and taking away all of these resources for the sake of our so-called our pet foods or our pets or our pet comforts, you know, fundamentally. And see, a lot of this is because we haven't investigated it. Yeah? Gene, you want to?
Yeah, so I tried going the vegan route, I guess you could say. So I ate fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I have a problem with sugar. So whenever I eat a lot of fruit, I have a sugar problem. So have I not, I guess, I'm clearly being ignorant somewhere, not feeling something all the way through. But that's kind of like where I got stuck. I don't know if other people get stuck, so I'm unofficial.
Well, can you see what happened though? You eat certain way where you're told it's more loving, so you eat that way, but we're not dealing with emotion. We just eat that way. And then when we eat that way, we get some body symptoms. And because we're focused on body comfort, we're going, oh, my body's uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? So what I do is I give up eating the loving way, right? Now, does that sound like the best answer to you?
Logical, no.
No. So rather than giving up eating the best way, how about dealing with our emotions that cause us to have reactions to things that we wouldn't, and once we've dealt with that, our whole life changes. So an example of that with fruit. a lot of fruit is not the same kind of sugar as sugar. Right? They're very simple sugars mixed with lots of fibre and lots of other minerals and so forth is what fruit is. Whereas when you have sugar, like when you have like a sugary drink or soda or something like that, it's just only sugar. Yeah? No vitamins, no minerals, no fibre, sugar only, pretty much. And a flavour, obviously. And that appeals to your senses. But obviously God made the fruit, so obviously it's got to be good for us. So if it's not feeling good for us, then there must be a reason. So the key is to then work through the reasons. Now, for many people, one of the reasons why they have fruit for a little while and then they have these reactions is because there's a lot of emotions based on grief that the fruit will start unlocking in you. And if the person doesn't want to feel their grief, what they'll start doing is they'll start having symptomatic reactions to the grief being withheld, which include hay fever, running nose, all these other sort of body type of symptoms. A hyped up response in your body sometimes as well occurs because you're worried, you're afraid of dealing with now the emotions that are being triggered by this very simple diet, right? So what I found myself when I started like a proper vegan diet, my body weight went like, I was about 80k, I went down to 62k. And everybody was saying, oh, you're looking terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, no, I'm just going to deal with the emotions that this is triggering for me, right? So I deal with the emotions that it's triggering me. As I deal with the emotions, I'm back at 80k, right? And healthier. I've had, I think over the last 25 years, 3 blood tests. Every blood test has come back, everything is perfect. Right? Now, if you don't deal with your emotions and you have a blood test on a vegan diet, everything won't be perfect. Because there will be certain emotions affect certain minerals and your absorption of minerals in your body. Certain emotions affect certain chemical systems in your body, you know, and even your hormonal systems in your body are affected by emotions. So if you don't deal with things emotionally, yes, there will be a problem. But isn't that great? You know there is, right? Then by doing it. Now, the average person doesn't do that though. The average person says, what I'm going to do is I do my vegan diet, and it's not a spiritual choice. It's not a spiritual one for the majority of people. What it is, people tell me that I should do it. So that's not a spiritual choice. That's just listening to a person like myself saying, you should, and then going, maybe I should, so I do. But that's not you making a choice for yourself to do it spiritually, right? So firstly, for most people, it's not a spiritual decision. It's not even a emotional decision. They make the decision fundamentally for physical reasons and well, you could say, and one emotional reason, and that is approval, or the seeming approval of others, right? So they make that decision, their health degrades, which is going to happen. Every time a person goes on a vegan diet properly, their health will degrade for the most part.
If they haven't
made
the spiritual choice.
Well, they haven't made the spiritual choice for the most part. So for the most part, of course, the health is going to degrade because there are spiritual and emotional things that are going to be triggered now. The key is to go through them. So when you go through them, you'll find everything fixes itself up and rights itself again. You follow? So my diet, and you've seen us here, right? In the morning, we have a smoothie which is half fruit. It's also half vegetables, and when I say vegetables, spinach, and a bit of protein as well, like nuts, right, in there as well, and fat in there as well. And so that's breakfast. Lunch is fruit. That's all I have is lunch, fruit. And do I look fairly healthy to you? Yeah. So I'm 61. Do I look like I'm at death's door? No. Because a lot of 61-year-olds are dying, right, from heart disease and all sorts of other things. So, and I've been doing this for 28 years. And like I said at the beginning, it was downhill. Yeah. But I was prepared because it was a spiritual decision, not any other reason. Yeah. Right.
So is the right thing to do here in case of self, I would have to examine basically everything that I eat, look at the source, look how it's being made, manufactured, where it comes from, and then potentially, once I'm more aware, make a decision?
Well, you could do it that way, couldn't you? But that's going to probably take a long time.
It's a lot of effort.
And it's a lot of effort. If I was you, I would start at the other end of it. I'd start top-down approach. What food is loving to eat? What food is economical to eat? What food is loving to the environment to eat? What food is loving to my body to eat? What food is actually, what's the truth about, these foods and how they've been created? So last week we looked at the issue of fruit, for example, and you look at how fruit is created. It's one of God's creations, yes? Obviously humans have manipulated the creation through genetic modification and so forth, but fundamentally all the genes come from God anyway. So fundamentally it's still God's creation. And then if you grow a tree, there's benefit to the soil. There's benefit to the air quality. There's benefit to the food for yourself, and not only benefit, but like one tree will grow thousands of fruit. One tree, thousands. Like, I remember when I was younger, I grew a nectarine tree in our backyard. It was this high. It got to this high. It'd be loaded with 2,000 or more fruit on it over the course of its every harvest. Right? Our entire family would eat it. We'd stew them. We'd jam them. And still there was more. There were too many to eat just from one tree, right? And I've grown up in where I was born was a town that was all about fruit and nut producing trees. And while it was done as monocultures, which I don't know I agree with, because it's not looking after the environment, at the end of the day, it was better than actually planting coffee or something like that, because fruit and nuts are going to have a better long-term benefit to everything. And in fact, even the animals can still eat the fruit, right? Whereas if you plant coffee, they can't eat that at all, right? So if you look at the spiritual issue first, like how is my food that I'm eating dominantly eating, how is it produced? And if you look at all the ones that are naturally produced, such as fruit and nuts, those things you can plant one thing and they'll grow for 50 years. In the first century we had olive trees that were 500 years old, right? They've been grown for 500 years. So, some of these trees can produce fruit every year for hundreds of years even. That's economical. That's a very economical process. So that is in harmony with love. If you look at nuts, it's the same. Very economical, in harmony with love. And not only that, the harvest is the seed for the next tree. And in fact, even with most fruit trees, you can just even cut a cutting off of it and graft it into another tree, and it produces fruit. So once you start understanding how beautiful that is, you go, well, why wouldn't I have more of that? Right? And then you look at things like vegetables. Well, they're a little different in the sense that you have to plant them mostly every year, don't you? So that's okay. But when they grow, you're going to have to make sure some of them seeds, so you can get the seeds off them and plant them again. Right? So obviously they're not as economical as fruit and nuts. So Mary and I have them 1 meal a day rather than 2. So with fruit and nuts we have them 2 meals a day, and with nuts I have them 3 meals a day generally, or 2 meals a day. And then with vegetables, 1 meal a day generally.
The greens. We have greens in the
Oh, we have greens in the morning with our fruit. Yeah. So, and the reason why we do it is because it makes a lot of sense from a loving perspective to do it. And also, I remember my life in the spirit world where we only had fruit and nuts to eat. right? And that's what we used to eat. So,
world?
in the spirit world.
I think it goes even further than that. I think you have to decide if you want to uphold love. Do you want to
Everywhere
love?
in your life.
Everywhere in your life. And then these physical decisions become easier and they become more intuitive, I suppose. It's when you're trying to sort of
Figure it out.
dissect the physical building blocks in your life that it becomes a labour. And also, from my experience, short-lived in your action. You don't sustain the action because you haven't made the principled choice that I want to love, or I want truth, or I want humility, or I want God, I want to develop faith. You know, that's why Jesus has been raising these principles so much, because that's what we aspire to do, is live in harmony with the principle. And then a lot of these things you guys ask us about, they're sort of subsequent results. We haven't sat down and gone, okay, what would be? You know, you're observing all the time, you're feeling, you're analysing not through a deep intellectual effort, just
But
through
emotionally, like
emotions.
how everything feels.
How does this all feel? Oh, something's off. And so I think that's a very important part of the process, and I think you find decisions easier then.
So if you go to the supermarket and your whole trolley is filled with just packets of things, how does it feel?
Well,
Artificial.
It feels artificial, yeah.
Not anymore, but yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. If you let yourself feel, you'd feel it, right? Yeah. So, you know, you would then go, well, you know, this isn't right. I've got plastic wrap here and plastic wrap there and this wrap there, and that being artificially produced. And how much goodness or vitamins is each one of them? Hardly anything at all, because it's all been put together, manufactured and put together for the most part, and many of them. And then you look at the more natural products, like, for example, brown rice is a pretty natural sort of a product, right? Brown, particularly the short grain, unhulled brown rice, right? On this trip around the world, we've found it so hard to find now. It's just incredibly hard to find, because everyone wants to get the very manufactured ones that are a bit longer and they soften up better, and the ones that are pre-pack and they're all already boiled for you, and and when it comes to actually getting the actual thing, it's pretty hard now. And it's the same with like rolled oats or something. Sometimes we like as a snack some rolled oats with maple syrup, right? So to make some milk, all you need to do is shove a few cashews in a blender, put a whole heap of water in, blend it. There's your milk. So you got some milk, right? Now you pour it on your oats and on your rolled oats, you know, ones that have just been crushed like that, rolled. Now, if you give it a few hours or so, it swells up, makes it nice and soft, really nice. And then we just pour a little bit of maple syrup on it, lovely, right? Lovely snack. And occasionally we'll have that, maybe once a week or something, maybe twice a week, you know. But every single one of those things are all naturally produced and also recurrent, in the sense that you can do it over and over and over again, right? But when you start looking at other processes, such as milking cows for milk, if any of you have been involved in that, and I have, like, there's a whole series of things that goes on there. Huge amount of effort goes on to produce actual cow milk, compared to just grabbing some nuts and shoving them in a blender when you need it. And so all of these things, now I don't want to get involved with you guys with all of these things, because what we're trying to focus on here is the real problem, which is love of self. You see, the real problem is you're defining giving yourself these things as a love of self. That's the real problem. When those things are blatantly obvious, not loving to other things. It's not loving to the environment. It's not loving to the animals involved. It's not loving to other humans who are doing a lot of this growing of plants that we use regularly. It's not loving to all of these areas. And we're not considering what loving is to everybody else. We're only considering what love of self is. Right? And this is our problem, is that, as Mary said, we're no longer focused on the principle of love of self. We're now focused on, I believe love of self means give me what I want, when I want it, how I want it, with whom I want it, anytime I want it. That's what I believe love of self is. And there's complete flaws in that philosophy. Right? And of course we need to look at what love of self really is, which would be an interesting discussion. But can you see we can't even get to that point if we're still emotionally and physically and intellectually addicted to this concept of our love of self? Can you see? We're not going to even get there. We're going to go, and then anytime somebody makes a suggestion like, why have you got a pet? You're all angry and bitter and twisted about it, and you get all upset about it and all in a rage about it. I'm pretty sure sometime in the future there's going to be a whole internet campaign about me talking about pets, right? At some point. And me talking about, wiping your bum, and me talking about all sorts of things. And the reason why is because we'd rather attack a person than consider what love of self would do. We have so strong motivations to continue our own unloving behaviour, even towards ourselves, that we're prepared to attack other people when they're just trying to help us work out what love of self actually is.
So, you know how the whole topic of this weekend is how sin stops us, our sin stops us from being in a relationship with God.
Yep.
So, back onto the other board now. So
Yep.
are all those reasons.
So these are all definitions of love of self that many of us have.
And is that what stops us from receiving God's love?
Of course, because they're all sins. So I'm wanting them.
Yeah.
I think it's good for me to have them, but they're actually all sins. So at some point, can you see some love will flow when I have sincere desire. But sooner or later, what's going to happen, even if a bit love flows, a bit of love flows from God initially because of my sincere desire, sooner or later, God's going to require that we look at our sin and be repentant for it. Now, when I am in this zone where I go, but this is loving to me, this is what I want, even though it's a sin. And this is the trouble with most of our sins, is we want them.
Yes.
We want them. We want them oftentimes with all our heart, and we put all of our effort of our life almost in getting them. You think of how much of your shopping trolley is there just to feed your sin. It's a fairly large amount, right? And so we're just not seeing our sin at all. So we're not aware. So of course the love can't flow until we're in a state of repentance about our sin. But we're not going to ever be in a place of repentance about our sin when I don't want to see what it is. And this is the trouble, is that we're not going to be in a place where we can receive more love unless we're prepared to look at our sin. Now, as I said this morning, a lot of our sin is about our concept of loving ourselves, what it means to love ourselves. And as you can see, we have a very small list. We could go for days here, by the way, because we haven't even looked at love of self sexually yet, and we haven't even looked at love of self emotionally yet, have we? What our concept of loving ourselves is emotionally or sexually, we haven't really looked at at all. And then we've only just briefly looked at the physical things we do where we think we're loving ourselves. Now, if most of what we believe is love of self is actually a sin, then can you see that every time I try to receive love from God, God's saying, but look at all your sin. Look at all your sin. Like I need you. God's really saying to you, look, sin is your creation. Sin is complete disharmony with God's law. It's therefore complete disharmony with God's personality. Do you understand that God's law is his personality? It's what he likes. His laws are what he likes. His laws are how he expresses his nature. Right? So God's laws are a large part driven by his personality and his nature. And we're saying, I want to break them. I want to be in disharmony with them, right? That's what we're really saying. And in saying that, we're saying to God, give me some of your love, but I want to be in disharmony with it. You guys go, oh, how can he give you love when you want to be in disharmony with the love he's going to give you? It's pretty difficult, isn't it, for you to even receive it under those circumstances. Yeah?
And this is just a follow-up question, is killing your pet a sin?
No, I'm not going to ask.
Well, why wouldn't you? Because that question wasn't asked in Canada either. Because it seems obviously that it breaks the life principle. But
Is
I
leaving
don't
it
understand. Like, I don't even have a pet, but
is leaving it alive a sin?
no, you can still love the animal. You could feed it
Yeah.
vegan food
Yeah,
and all
but
that.
Can you
Can I
see?
just-
Can you see? You're not asking a question. You've already formulated in your mind what the answer is, and you're not even really asking a question now. All you're basically trying to do is say, "I'm wrong and you're right." No, it is. That's exactly what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Well, I don't understand it. Like I said,
I know
don't even
you
have
don't
it.
understand it, but see, if you felt God's love, you would. Is what I'm saying.
It's okay to take the life of an animal.
If it's something that a human has created just for the purpose of its own selfish needs, the animal is trapped. The animal is trapped. It's in a prison.
Okay.
You will be freeing it from the prison. Now, you can free it from the prison in other ways, but you can't do it straight away.
Is it not God's life though? That's what I don't get. It's like, I didn't give it life.
It still has life. It's going to have it in the spirit world.
Is it because it's built well?
So it does,
Yeah.
it does
Yeah,
exist.
but like, can we
But that's-
just cut the
Yeah.
idea that people love their pets?
They don't love their
love
pets.
No, I get that. I get that it's an addiction. I get that it's...
So it's not love.
Emotional
Right,
support.
that's right. But
So-
looking at the animal itself and the act of actually taking the life of that animal...
You're
I don't
already
understand.
not loving it.
I get that. I get
No,
that.
you don't, because otherwise you wouldn't even ask the next question. The next question is it right to kill it? That's the
Right.
question you're asking. But you're already not loving it.
True. But
So can't you see that?
unlike taking drugs, this actually has a life. So I could not do another addiction.
So
and
does
not
every
kill someone.
animal you kill for it has a life too. Every animal you kill for your pet
Right, but
has
you
a
don't-
life.
right, you don't need to kill the other animals. So.
Well, how's your pet going to eat if you don't kill the other
Well,
animals?
there's vegan cat food and vegan dog food.
Wow.
There is.
How many? Yeah, but how many of you do that?
No, I know. And again, I don't have a pet.
You
It doesn't- It's the
Honestly,
life thing that I don't get.
yeah, but it's sort of, I just feel like there's a whole set of emotions that people who have pets need to, if they want to love themselves, if they want to love other people, and if they want to love the animal, they will work through. And they, at the end of that, they will realize, I have this animal and it is unloving to me, it is unloving to others, and it is unloving to the animal.
I
So
understand
then they make the decision.
So now we've got like billions of these animals that have been created by humans.
I get.
They've been purposely engineered by humans.
Right, different breeds.
They're not natural, they're not naturally occurring. We wouldn't have billions of them if they were in nature only, would we? We would only have maybe millions, but we certainly wouldn't have billions, right? The reason we have got billions is the direct result of human action. How are humans going to correct the results of their sin here?
Right. It's the life thing, though. So the life is, it's okay to take that life then.
Well, you need to talk to God about that.
Yeah, you need to sort it out with
You need to
God.
sort it out with God, you see? Yeah. But you don't want to, right? The average person doesn't want to. What they want to
I
know,
just want to know the answer.
no, you don't.
I don't. I don't.
No, you don't, because
Okay.
you're not weighing everything up. So you
No,
don't want to know the
I
answer.
mean, it's only that life piece that I don't understand. I understand that it's ruining the environment. I understand that we've created it over millennia.
Yeah, but if you understood how much it's ruining the environment and how much it's ruining the other animals and how God feels about the ruin of the environment and all the natural animals, then you might have a different opinion, right?
Well, I guess I just want to know
No, you
if God
don't.
allows us to take that life.
God expects you to correct your own sin.
Yeah.
If your sin has been creating billions of animals that wouldn't normally exist, except for humans' sake, then humans are going to have to address that at some point, right? Now, Under normal circumstances, what would happen is the animals would die out.
Right.
Right? If
God's law
you
can take care of it.
Well, no, if you didn't look after the animal, the animal would die out. But unfortunately, you can't just say, oh, I'm not going to look after the animal more and I put it in the environment because it's just going to kill more other animals now. So at some point, you're going to have to be responsible for your choice of what you created. Now, the most loving choice is going to be what I'm saying. That's going to be the most loving to everything.
Is putting them down?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. Now,
it's not good, is it?
It's only one,
terrible.
one generation, and the problem would be fixed. In one generation. What you're proposing, the problem won't be fixed for hundreds of generations. Because if you put them out in the wild, right?
Well, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting like the domestic house cats, like that don't leave the home.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is neutering them, perhaps,
No.
right? No. Well, how are they going to stop procreation?
I've known many people that have had just house cats that they never leave the house. And, I'm not saying that's the majority of them.
No, it's the minority by a long way.
Right. Well, right.
Yeah, right.
I get that. It's only the light piece that I just did not.
But you're not letting yourself feel God at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if the answer is that God says it's okay to kill cats, then kill cats.
No, I don't want you to. I don't want you to feel that way. What I want you to do is ask God what the feeling is.
Feeling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because if you can feel God's feelings on the matter, He has some strong opinions. He always has strong opinions. Right? And if you could feel them, then you would know what to do. But see, you want to be told what to do, which is not the same thing. You want somebody else to be responsible for working it out with God, and then you hear from them what the answer is. And that's not what I'm suggesting here. I'm saying you've got to work it out with God. And the reason why you can't is because of your own sin.
And this is the challenge that Jesus and I face when we talk about God's truth with people, because sin wants finite answers, and it wants comfort, and it wants definitives, and it wants reassurance for sin, and it wants all these things. And so when we come out and talk to people, one of the reasons why Jesus has really wanted to focus on principles on this trip is because we're trying to direct people towards their relationship with God and the very blocks that prevent them connecting with God and God's feelings. Because the reality is sin has made life on earth complicated. It doesn't have to be, but because sin fights for itself, everything becomes a complex issue. And
so you fixing your sin is going to be a complex issue. You repairing the damage of what you've done is going to be a complex issue.
And if we even talk about making cashew milk and having oats and killing cats and all of that, everyone then sort of goes, right, that's what like Eugene said. He said, I did this thing and it didn't work out.
You want the rules to be determined by somebody else who has a connection with God, telling you what to do. That's not going to help your connection with God.
And that's so important that you grasp that. We're not trying to give you a set of rules. We're trying to inspire
show you what's sin.
Yeah, and say, look, have you felt about this thing? Have you felt about this thing? Have you felt about this thing? Because all of those things are blocking your connection with God. And once you create that connection, it's going to be a lifelong relationship, an eternal relationship in which you learn and grow and change your actions, change your feelings continually. And I understand there's not a lot of trust in that process yet. And that's why there's a strong demand for tell me exactly what to do.
Which is out of line.
Yeah. But that's what Jesus was talking about, was that yesterday morning, about demands. It's a panic. It's and when we have strong feelings, the best thing to do is to have those feelings and pray. And if you still have questions after that, well, you probably after that won't have as many questions, as other feelings and other realizations, and it's sort of a deepening thing.
But let's face some truths. The way humans have treated domesticated animals for millennia, it's cruel.
It's very bad.
You're perfectly okay with the cruelty, but not ending it. Having a pet is cruel to the pet. It's cruel. it's restricting its life. Imagine putting a cat who's meant to roam in the, like, and by the way, these cats are manufactured cats, not like cats that are wild, like what do you have here, bobcats and panthers and, you know, mountain lions and things like that. Now, those kind of animals have obviously learned how to survive. These animals are completely dependent on humans for survival, and also the humans themselves are restricting the operation of the animal to have, and it's just for the human, so the human has something to pat at night and not feel lonely. Right? It's not for the sake of the cat. The cat would like to procreate. It would like to roam. It would like to experience it. When I say like, it doesn't have a sense of itself, but it's been instinctually created to do these things. And you're putting it in a prison called home. And you don't see it as cruel. You don't, and so to my mind, if you got that and you got death where you free the spirit body of the cat to roam, I can see the more loving choice. The more loving choice is to free the cat so it can roam. What you're doing to it is cruel. But see, we don't see it as cruel. We think of it as just having a pet. Right? It's the same with domesticated animals such as goats and sheep and all those kind of things. Now, sheep probably a bit different than others because sheep also have wool, which has to be shorn at some point. And of course, you know, the way they're being bred, you could shear the sheep and there'd be some benefit, and the sheep is still able to roam. It's able to at least roam in the paddock at least. With the cat, it's in the, if you're going to be loving, it's going to have to stay in the house. Right? Same as many of your dogs, it's going to have to stay in the house because when it goes out, it terrorizes everything else, right? Because of the attitude you have, right? It terrorizes everything else. And so, you know, it chases the birds and chases the animals up the trees and, you know, it terrorizes everything. And this is what we've found in Australia, that if you remove those animals, those domesticated animals from an area, all the nature comes back within years, like within a few years, everything multiplies and it's amazingly beautiful as a result. But you see, we're not seeing the actions we're taking as cruel. But eating meat is cruel to animals, and feeding meat to your animals is cruel, but keeping the animal in the house is cruel as well. And at some point, you've got to see the cruelty of it all. And God's trying to say, look at your sin, look at your sin. And you're going, oh, but if I've got to kill the animal, then that's just as bad. And I'm going, how is it just as bad as torturing the animal for 12 years while you have it? It's not, you know, I know myself, I would rather die than be tortured for 12 years. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Right? I have been tortured in my life more than once, and it wasn't very nice, even for a short period of time. You know, the longest we've been tortured, Mary was once for 3 days, me once for 3 days. It was terrible. Imagine being tortured your entire life, which is what a lot of these domesticated animals are. They're tortured their entire life. They don't even understand anymore their own purpose for life anymore. There's no instinctual connection anymore. It's been bred out of them. You know, it's so damaging what we do, and yet we don't see it as cruel. We just see it as, oh, it's just a pet.
And
we don't see it as a love issue, is what I'm saying.
people are more upset about this discussion we're having about pets
Than
they
200
are
million children dying
about
every year.
abortion.
Yeah.
I was thinking slaves too, tortured their whole life.
Slaves, there's people dying in wars this moment that we're sitting here talking.
Yeah.
And people are
More
more
upset
upset
about their
about
pets.
the issue of pets.
Yeah, that tells me we've got things way out of context, way out of priority.
Well, we're in our, because what
We're
does
in our addictions, right?
what does a pet give you? It gives you comfort. That's why you have it.
Yeah.
Can't
You're not prepared to take responsibility for the fact that you created it, that you have it there, that you're using it for your own purposes, and you're being cruel to it while you're doing it. Not prepared to come face to face with your own sin is what's happening, right? You know, and we look at other animals. There's so many animals being slaughtered for the sake of cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, not just for food. You know, but even if you look at all the food, we don't need to eat them. And yet we're doing this, we're creating a whole industries based on this. We don't need to. But now that we have, how are we going to fix it? Somebody's going to have to be prepared to undo it. Somebody's going to have to be prepared to stop it, and hopefully within a generation, because if we don't do it in the next generation, we're going to end up with no native animals in most places of the world. That's already happening. You know, Mary and I walked through the Alps in Austria this trip. We went for an 18-kilometre hike. We saw 2 birds and 2 insects.
Wow.
In an 18-kilometre hike in the Alps, in summer with trees. There were trees everywhere. We saw 2 birds, 2 insects. We didn't see any animals at all, right? Except for dogs and cats. People were walking their dogs and their cats on their 18-kilometre hikes, right? That's how far it's going, and it's happening very rapidly now because there's 8 billion people doing this. You know, it's not just a few million people doing it like there might have been historically. Now there's billions of people doing these unloving things, and very few of us are prepared to face the facts. Now, can you see how hard it is for me to even present the facts to you? So how hard is it going to be for you to find your own facts? It's going to be pretty hard if you're already arguing with somebody who already knows the facts, right? Then it's going to be pretty hard for you to admit your own sin, your own facts. And this is why, substantially, hardly any of the world is changing in a positive manner. Even the people who've heard divine truth, not changing in a positive manner because they're not prepared to look at their sin honestly and see the cause of it. And when it comes to the love of self issue, it's the biggest issue. Right?
I realized too that how many things I didn't even look at. I was driving on a road trip listening to the series up until now.
Yep.
And the toilet paper came up, and I stopped at a rest stop, and I'm using toilet paper, and I'm like, oh, then I need a coffee to stay awake, and I want that chocolate for the sugar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't never even, and I was thinking about COVID, how everybody was in,
No,
everybody was in a
Same.
panic because they couldn't get toilet paper.
That's right.
It was run out of the stores.
And we don't
people
even
were
need
fighting over toilet paper. And I'm like, we don't even need it.
That's right. If you have a cloth that you wash once a week or once a few days, and you wash your bottom properly, you would be just drying it like you use your towel for drying your whole body when you get out of the shower.
And I never even considered it or thought or even gave it one second of thought. And I've been listening to divine truth
for ages, right? Yeah. So, and this is the problem we find is that most people are not prepared to examine their daily life and see, here's a sin, and here's a sin, and here's a sin, and here's a sin. But they say, to receive God's love. And I'm going, well, it's not a very honest, sincere desire to receive God's love if you're not prepared to examine where you're living your life out of harmony with the love you're asking to receive. Right?
And even on the pet thing, when my dog died, and my dog was with me through a very difficult period in my life.
Yeah.
I wept because I felt how much pressure I put on this being to support me.
Yeah. But if you think about it,
and I was like, what the heck? This was all for me.
Yeah, most pets, if you think about it, most people who have pets, when the pet dies, there's more tears in the household for the pet than there is for somebody down the road dying. Right? That shows you how distorted we've become with regard to our attitudes. Yeah, very extremely distorted.
So I wanted to say, like, yesterday also partially I was feeling this. Like when we have these talks, I get this feeling of like helplessness or like overwhelming, where I feel like, okay, so we cannot distinguish, but then at the same time, like we don't have enough love, but we can receive love because we have sin, but I don't know what the sin is. And then it becomes this circle.
This is not honest though.
So then,
this is not honest. You do know what the sins are.
Okay.
You do know, most of you know. Most of you know already what they are. You just don't want to give them up. So you don't want to see them as sins. You know, it's like with the love of self issue, we list a whole heap of things, but you don't want to see them as sins. You want to see them as, that's loving myself. What are you're asking me to stop loving myself, and I'm not. I'm saying, no, that is not God's definition of loving yourself, right? And it's the same with our sin. We think they're good. We do think they're good, but we know often they're not good for everyone. You know, do you think, let's look at the pet again, if we want to. I don't really want to, but let's look at it. Do you think locking up an animal in your own home for its entire life just for your sake, and by the way, it's just for your sake when you're home, and when you're not home, he's just there doing nothing, like bored out of his brain probably, right? And you're prepared to do that for its entire life. And do you think anybody who's reasonable would look at that and go, I love my animal? Like, you know, let's be more honest. You've got to learn to be more honest about things. And when you say you don't know what a sin is, that is not honest. Like, God's totally willing to tell you the conscience can be fully functioning. You can be open and ask, and you'll receive plenty of evidence. The law of attraction is already trying to demonstrate through your life what is true.
So we can get the answer even while we have an existing wrong belief, we can still get an answer from the conscience.
Correct, yes, yes.
In fact, that's going to be your whole
That's going to be your main way.
Was it in this group or last week that you opened about sincerity? Was that last week?
Well, we started in Canada probably.
Yeah. But you know, God can't require perfection of us because
you're not perfect.
You're not perfect.
Yeah.
But God requires sincerity.
Yeah.
And when you're sincere, this opens you.
You want to find out.
It's like literally like a gate is closed inside of you when you fight for your sin.
Yeah.
And when you're sincere, you don't have to know all the truth about the sin or have gotten rid of all the sin, but it opens you. It opens you to God's opinion, to God's love, to God's feelings, to God's truth. And then the sincerity itself is like a thing that pulls it open. You're opening this up inside of you. And then change can happen. You can receive God's love in that sincerity process.
Yeah.
A lot of times what we want is to stay closed, fight for our sin and get God's love, and get God's love to convince us that it's worth giving up the sin, and then we might give it up.
Yeah.
But
we're like spoiled children who just want what we want from God, but are not prepared to actually look at our own behaviour being bad in any way at all. And we're like spoiled children who want to be told, you're all right, you're great, aren't you fantastic, everything's fine.
You're doing your best.
I'll give you some love. That's how we want it. And we don't want to look at the truth, right? And that's the problem, is that we're not facing truth. Now, when you're prepared to face personal truth, the conscience becomes open. When you desire personal truth, the conscience becomes open. You'll see areas that you never even thought of before, and you go, oh, I can see I'm doing something wrong there. I can see I'm doing something wrong there as well. You'll see them clearly, but you'll only see them clearly if you're sincere about your desire for truth. And this is the main problem we have. Most of us aren't. You know, Mary and I experience this every week we visit with people. It's like they say they want truth. We tell them something. Oh, bang, it's like everyone's upset. Why are they upset? If they were sincere about truth, they would love it. They wouldn't be upset. They'd love it. So if you're upset, then it means you didn't love it and you weren't sincere. Like, if you're all emotionally challenged, well, that's the reason why you weren't sincere. Because there's emotional challenges in that, you know.
And then you could be humble in that process and go, oh, this is sin fighting for itself. This is
what it feels like. Remember I said on Friday, I gave you some homework and I said, what does it feel like to have sin fighting for itself? Well, what you're doing now, many of you, is exactly what it feels like. It's exactly what it feels like.
So remember the feelings.
So
you're going to have this
We just did
feeling.
our homework.
And you're going to have this feeling at different points in your life when we're not here, you know, and you go, oh, this is me when I'm really fighting for something that I want to hold on to that's not necessarily.
All these justifications. And, you know, in the case of the pets, I'll justify torture over, like, sanely freeing the animal from its trap. That's what I'll justify. And I'll justify that for its entire life. because my sin wants to justify it. And I'll justify the fact that now there's billions and billions of animals that are being created just for humans, no other purpose. Every cow on this planet pretty much now, instead of roaming free like a wild buffalo, which is what it was intended to do, right? Yeah. That's, you know, you look at what did we do with all the wild animals? Like wild buffalo, how many of them are left? Yeah, not a lot, right? And, you know, in Australia we have these big wild buffalo too, different than your buffalo, and I think there's like they're nearly extinct. Right. Yeah, in the Northern Territory. But, you know, so in the, you know, when we're doing this, we don't care about those animals. We're just caring about this animal because it gives me, I can eat meat from it, or my dog can eat meat from it, or my cat can eat meat from it, or I can keep it trapped for its entire life and make me feel good about trapping it for its entire life because I can pat it every night. It makes me not feel alone. It makes me, so in other words, it helps me avoid a whole heap of emotions. Some of which are physical comfort, some of which are emotional comfort, and I'm prepared to engage cruelty for the sake of that. Right? And we are. We're, like I said on Friday, we are prepared to murder our own children for the sake of comfort. That's what abortion is. You're prepared to do it. You know, we're prepared to demand against children for our own comfort, which is what a miscarriage is. Right? We're prepared to do it. We don't understand what we're doing frequently. Nobody's ever told us what we're doing, but we are prepared to do it. And we are, you know, if you look at like miscarriage, 100 million children die every year from miscarriage on the average, right? Every year. There's 100 million new children arriving in the spirit world every year who have never experienced really a life on earth. And the reason why they die is because of the projections coming from their parents that they are going to satisfy a role. And the child can't bear the role, and so it passes, right? That's why it passes. Now, nobody tells you that because nobody wants to hear that. Right? Nobody wants to hear, what they want to hear is, I'm desperate for a child, I'm desperate for a child, give me a child, put me in the IVF program, give me a child, you know. They're not looking at why these things are happening. God created a perfect system, it's been destroyed by human feelings, by human emotions, and yet we're not looking at why it's happening. And we're going to have to be much braver than that. We're going to have to look at the truth. So if we examine what real love of self is, can we do that?
Please.
Yeah? Because it's worth comparing what real love of self is compared to what oftentimes we think love of self is. Okay. So, rather than ask you what it is, I'm just going to say what it is. When I love myself, I have faith in love, truth, and humility. So, what does it mean to have faith in love? What does that mean, do you think?
In God's version of love.
Yes, but what does it mean to have faith in it?
Oh, to know that it's possible to learn what it is.
Not possible.
To know that love fixes everything, heals everything.
Love fixes everything, heals everything.
Yes.
Yeah, but you see, how many of you feel that? See, if you look at your real feelings, most of you feel, let's look at romantic love. What do most of you feel about it? It's a pretty topsy-turvy, like tricky, difficult thing, is what most of you really feel.
What did you say, Paddy?
It hurts.
It hurts.
Romantic love hurts.
Yeah, love hurts.
There's a
Yeah.
song.
So the average person doesn't have faith in love. They feel that they have faith that love hurts.
Yeah, that's true.
Love hurts. This is where these songs come from, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're all saying how bad it is and how gut-wrenching it is, and it can be so good one minute and so bad the next. Love can't be ever bad, you understand? So if it feels bad, there's something wrong with your love.
But is it the love or the expectations that as humans we have?
Of course, it's the addictions. Remember, expectations are our addictions. It's our addictions of what we believe love will give us, and not getting them, that hurts. That's what we think hurts. But love never does, ever. Even if someone you love leaves you, it doesn't hurt. Right? If you love them, how can it hurt?
Right. You can love them and let them go. And
Sorry?
if you truly love them, you can even let them go and still.
Well, you say let them go, but
No, that sounds right. Yeah.
that had a tendency to suggest that you owned them in the first place.
What I mean is, most humans, when we love somebody, if we lose them, we hurt because we thought that somehow they supposed to stay with us. But when you truly love, you're not even expecting them to be with
Well,
you.
yeah, you want them for a role, just like you wanted your pet for a role.
Right.
Basically, fundamentally, that's what most of us believe love is, right? But it's not. Like the person you love doesn't have a role.
Right.
They don't even have a role to love you. The person you love, they're just there and you love them. Right? You love their nature, their personality, what they want to do with their life, what they want, the choices they make, the emotions they have. So that should give you a bit of clue what love of self actually is too, shouldn't it? Yeah. So you have faith in love, right? You want to? Was there a hand over here?
So I guess like faith and love, I guess like that's where my question with the whole, with the US elections, it just feels like.
I don't want to talk about the US election.
Oh, okay, no, I'm using this as an example, I realize this because I'm asking that question because I don't have faith in love. Because I'm thinking, okay, well, US people only have 3 choices, Democrat, Republican, or independent. And if I were a US citizen to choose an independent, because I feel like it's the more loving choice, I feel like.
If you had faith in love, you wouldn't probably choose any of them because none of them are loving.
Yeah.
But that's probably is all I need to say on the subject. Are any of them loving? Are any of these people loving? Most of them got into power through lots of manipulation, control, a lot of misrepresentation of facts, misrepresentation of truth.
Avoidance.
Are any of them loving? So why are you voting for someone who's not loving? Because it's the worst, the best of the worst.
The lesser of evil.
The lesser evil. There's no such thing. It's like if they're not loving, it's evil, right? So if you feel you're loving, you become a representative. But how are you going to do that? And are you going to put yourself through that? Are you going to do that? Are you going to, most of us won't do it because we want somebody else to do it for us. Most of us don't want to take personal action. We want somebody else to take the action for us. This was inbred into us in our childhood, where mummy and daddy fixed all of our problems for us. And so now we want a politician to fix our problems for us. The biggest problems you face are not what political leader you have. The biggest problem you have is the sin that's inside of you. That's the biggest problem you have. So, honestly, the election, whatever election it is, pales into insignificance compared to the biggest problem inside of you, which is the sin that exists inside of you. If you're not prepared to address this sin inside of you, the net result is going to be a sinful environment that you have created and participated in and support. So unless you fix the sin inside of you, nothing's going to get better, right? You can't expect to get a politician to make things better when you're not willing to fix your own sin. It's hypocritical to ask him to fix everything that you have created with your sin. Why don't you first fix everything you've created with your sin in your own life, and then you might be able to, without any hypocrisy, ask somebody else to participate in the same process. But see, most of us don't want to do that. What we want is we want someone to rescue us from the pain and suffering of our sin. Right? So in other words, we're not prepared to address and properly and permanently address the problems we face. And that applies whether it's a pet or a baby or a life or a what food we eat, we're not prepared to make the proper decisions and the choices that we need to make that are loving, that would bring about change. And yet we project at our politicians that they should do it for us, but frequently they are people who are hungry for power, so they're often the worst kind of people when it comes to love. Because they are hungry for the power over others, they're hungry for domination of others, they're hungry for the adulation that comes from being the president or whatever. They're hungry for it, otherwise they wouldn't be there probably. But if we all had to focus, I'm going to fix my problems first, and I can do that, and I don't need a government to help me do that, because my problems are inside of me. No government's going to fix them for me, because all of the current pain and suffering that I experience in my life are resulting from the problems that are inside of me. Now, if I just get someone external to me, whether it's a partner or a friend or a therapist or a government to try to fix my problems, they can't, because the problems are all inside of me and I'm going to have to feel them and fix them. Right? This is a basic fundamental principle of self-responsibility, which is actually an act of love of self. You see? If I love myself, I'll be responsible for myself. I won't expect anyone else to be responsible for me. So should we write that on the board? Yeah. It's not number 2, by the way, because there's a lot before we go down there, but I won't number them, because let's look at the real thing I need to do is be self-responsible. That's a loving act. Self-responsible means self-responsible. That means responsible for my emotions, my beliefs, my sexual feelings, and my physical welfare. So, in other words, responsible for everything in my life. I am responsible, nobody else. No government, no religion, no God is responsible for those things. I am responsible. Right? That's what it means to love myself. I am responsible. I can handle everything inside of me. I can handle everything. So if I have faith in love, for example, and I'm self-responsible in love, I don't expect anybody else to love me. What I do is I say, I am going to love myself first. I am going to be responsible for loving me, and that lets all you off the hook for loving me. You don't have to love me, which is appropriate given that love is a gift, isn't it? By me loving myself, I'm saying to you, you don't have to. And when you do love me, one day you might, and when you do, I'll think, oh, that's wonderful. That's a lovely gift. But I won't expect it. Right? If I love myself, I don't even need it. I don't need it from you. I just would love to have it. Does that make sense? In other words, I long for it, but I don't need it. Right? If I love myself. So if I'm self-responsible in truth, I don't wait for somebody else to tell me the truth. I look for the truth myself. And I go and find that truth myself. And I'm diligent finding that truth if I love the truth. And I do it because truth sets me free. So without the truth, I'm trapped, I'm in a cage, I'm restricted, I'm controlled, I'm fundamentally not myself anymore. I'm the being of somebody else's creation if I don't know the truth. So seeking truth should be a very fundamental desire that I've developed, that I want to know the truth. And of course I need to start with the truth about me. If I love myself, I start with the truth about me, where I'm at, what I'm doing, what are my sins, what's my personality, what's my nature, be that. Right? To love myself, I have to be humble. What does that mean? It means I mean to love my emotions. So if I love my emotions, so let's just write that down. What will I do?
Let them flow.
I will let them flow when they're there. I won't stop them, control them, functionally try to deny them. I won't try to zone out of them, try to make out I don't have them. I will love them, and which means being compassionate towards them as well, doesn't it? So you're going to have some bad emotions, and sometimes those emotions are going to feel bad, and you're going to have some compassion for yourself. And nobody else has to have compassion for you, by the way. You need to learn to have compassion for yourself, right? If somebody else has compassion for you, well, that's an act of love on their part, which is a gift, which is wonderful, but they don't have to, right? You need to learn to have compassion for yourself. You need to have your feelings and go, wow, that feeling was really bad, but I'm going to have it still. Like the grief that I feel was really bad, but I'm going to have it still. The shame I felt was really bad, but I'm going to have it still. Oh, that joy, that was really good. That was worth having. And then, oh, that sadness, that was really good too, because as it passed through me, it passed out of me and it's gone, and then I'm not sad anymore. I need to learn how to feel my own emotions. I need to understand what they are. I need to investigate my own feelings, right? So, so now if I took medication to suppress my feelings, I'm not investigating my feelings anymore. So that's not an act of love of self. If I share my feelings with other people, well, now what I'm doing is I'm expecting other people to be embroiled in my feelings. That's not loving to them or to me. They don't have to be embroiled in my feelings because I need to learn how to have my own. So, like when you notice all the people who, when they go on a holiday, take a camera with them and all they do is click pictures everywhere they go, right? Everybody's got to line up another picture, another picture, another picture. And why does all that happen? It's because you're not prepared to have your own experience while you're there and then remember it later. Right? And that's because fundamentally most of us are so detuned from our feelings and also our memories that we need a picture to prod our memories. Right? And the reason why we need that is because we don't love ourselves yet. Right? If we loved ourselves, you'd want to be in the experience without any hanging devices off of you. Do you know what I mean? Like most of us have got a watch on our wrist or a mobile phone in the back pocket or something, right? And you're going for a walk or something and you've got all these paraphernalia attached to you. How good does it feel? It doesn't feel great. You whack it, these things are bashing on you and, That's why I don't have any. Because you're not in the experience when it's like that. You're avoiding the experience, right? So when you love humility, you love your experience. You love what your senses are telling you. So let's say you've got a sore on your body. You're not hating it, you're loving it because you understand it's telling you something wrong, right? And then when you get an injury of some kind, you care for it because that's a part of you loving you. Right? You don't ignore it and stoically go, I'm tough, I can handle it, You don't do all of that. You care for the problem, for yourself. That's loving you. Yeah? When you look at the areas of truth in particular, love and humility, when you look at all of those things, most of us have no idea what it means to love ourselves. And yet we think we know what it means when somebody else loves us. How strange is that? We don't know what it means to love ourselves, and yet we think we know what it means for Mary to love me. But I don't know how to love myself. How do I know when she's loving me? Now, if she's telling me that I must feel my own emotions, and I'm getting angry, I'm saying, why aren't you listening to them instead? Why can't I share them with you? Right? Then fundamentally, I'm saying, I don't want to love myself by being responsible for my own feelings, but I want you to. And isn't that an act of hypocrisy? I'm expecting somebody else to do something for me that I'm not prepared to do for myself. Isn't that hypocritical? Of course it is. Right? So this is a problem. When it comes to love of self, if you look at the fundamental principles, remember we've listed 4 principles, and most of us think, I understand that. Why does he keep harping on about those 4 principles? It's like, and the reason why I do is because most of us have no idea how to apply them in our personal life at all. Now, if we look at love or faith initially, because faith is what drives a hope for your future. It drives you to do things in your future. So if you don't have any faith in love, you're not going to seek love in your life. You're not going to seek God's love. You're not going to seek romantic love. You're not going to seek friendships, friendship love. You're not going to seek all the different types of loves that are available to you. You're not going to seek for them because you don't have any faith in them. You think, oh, they all hurt me in the past, so, and because I've got all this hurt that I'm unwilling to be humble about, which, by the way, is an act of love to yourself to be humble of them and let them go, because otherwise you're carrying them around for the rest of your life. And for as long as you choose to carry them, they will remain. So it's not just the rest of life on earth. If you choose to carry them for another 200 years or 300 years after that, that's how long they're going to be there, harming your life, right? That's a very unloving thing to do to yourself, right? To yourself. So to love yourself, you're going to have to learn to love your emotion, love the truth, love your emotional truth even. So even though you know it's not God's truth, you go, wow, I am real angry with that person. I've got to, in that place, have compassion. Go, okay, I'm real angry. I've got to learn how to love knowing that, because if I know that and I see that, now I can maybe do something about it, right? But if I don't love knowing that, I'll go, I don't deny that. I don't want to hear that. No, I'm good. I'm okay with everyone. That kind of feeling, right? And that's not loving yourself, because you're not being honest with yourself. The very worst person that you can be dishonest with is yourself. Right? It's not an act of love of self to be dishonest with yourself. It's far better to be honest with yourself. Then you know things about yourself, and anything you don't like, you can change. Right? But if you don't know, and you don't know what the truth is, then how do you know what to change? If you don't like it, you don't even know that you have it, let alone whether you like it or not, about yourself, Oftentimes the person we're scared of the most is ourselves. You're scared of the feelings you have, the emotions you have, the desires you have, the beliefs you have, the feelings that are triggered by those beliefs that you have. And often that's the very person that you need to accept first, is you have those feelings and you have those beliefs and you have those desires, and let's get real about them, Is there a song that goes, let's get real?
Let's make one.
I have to make one, won't we? So,
It's let's get loud.
there's let's get loud, and then there's let's get physical, and then there's let's get... I don't know one called let's get real. So, to come face to face with sin, you're going to have to get real about everything. And if you think about the principles, faith, love, truth, and humility, the way you love yourself is by practicing those principles for yourself. That's the primary way you will love yourself. Right? That will result in loving yourself, like with your beliefs, with your emotions, with your sexual desires, and with your physical life. But if you start there, it'll permeate down into your life. Makes sense, doesn't it? Because they're the highest of the hierarchy of the things you can do. So it's going to permeate down into the other areas of your life if you do that. But at this stage, I've barely met a single person on earth that has come to love themselves in this way. They hear things about themselves that are sins, and they straight away hate on themselves about it, or they straight away criticize themselves about it, or they straight away defend themselves about it, or they straight away attack somebody else about it, or they're not just open to receiving that information, going, you beauty, I now have this really good information about myself that I didn't have before. when I think I've said to you before, but when I compare my 33-year-old clueless self with my 60-year-old becoming aware self, and I look back at the 33-year-old clueless self, that person didn't know anything about even loving himself at all. Didn't know anything about caring for himself, didn't know anything. When I say anything, he knew some things compared to some people around him, but in terms of compared to God's standards, hardly knew anything at all about it. Right? And the only way that's changed is by me getting real about these things. Where's my faith? What do I feel about love? What do I feel about truth? What do I feel about feeling my feelings? What do I feel about humility? What do I feel about my state in the world compared to everybody else's state in the world? And what I mean by that, am I equal to everybody, or do I see myself as inferior or superior, or, you know, and how do I feel with God? Do I see myself as God is my creator, God is my lawgiver, or do I see it as I'm the creator of my life, I'm my own lawgiver? What, you know, I've had to confront all those things in this process, and what I'm encouraging you to do is to do the same. It's going to be tricky. And if you do it, you'll be sincere. Because you can't do it without being sincere. You just can't. It's like impossible to make real progress towards God without you becoming sincere. God designed it that way, fortunately. Imagine if you could be fake.
Tricky or terrifying?
Sorry?
Sometimes terrifying.
What do you mean?
So once you are able to see, let's say, where you are, your condition.
Yeah.
Once you get that truth, it could be a hard thing
to accept.
To accept and know where you are. You know,
yeah, but isn't it better to know where you are than can be completely clueless about it?
No, absolutely. But I'm just saying that not just tricky, but sometimes it's terrifying.
Well, it might be terrifying, but terror is just another emotion you're going to have to learn how to feel. Because when you're humble and you love yourself, you'll learn how to feel terror.
We're in the process.
That's what you'll do, right?
Am I allowed to ask a quick question about emotion?
Sure.
In the mental health field, they try to say that we get fractured and broken off in different parts.
We do.
And so that's true. So like, if someone's saying to me like, how old do you feel in that place? I'm thinking that it's me, but then how do I know if it's me or if it's just spirits? Because I get confused.
We talked about this last week as well, so
okay.
Probably some of you need to listen
Okay.
to that. But the reality is that throughout your entire life, you've been taught to not love yourself with your emotions. What that has looked like is that you've been taught to suppress them when they happen. So let's say you were 2 and you felt something, and mum and dad smacked you, and you felt rejected. Let's say that, and then when you started crying, they said, "You do it. You keep crying. I'm going to do it again." So you stop crying. So now you're not allowed to even cry about your rejection anymore. So now that emotion got stored. They weren't loving you, and now you're being taught how to not love yourself as well, right? So then when you were 5 and you started to experiment sexually and they saw you playing with yourself or whatever, and then they go, you know, they make fun of you or they criticised or let's say your mum had some shame and she projected all her shame at you or something like that. So, or your dad saw it and he had some sexual issues and he sort of was fascinated by it and you felt the sexual sleaziness of that as well. Let's say those things happened. Now, and then you were taught you're not allowed to feel that either, so you had to shut all that down too, right? So you were taught not to love yourself there either. You were taught not to feel your feelings there either. And then, let's say you were a teenager and you fell in love with somebody for the first time and everyone around you made fun of you, all your friends, why do you like that person, that's silly, you know, that person's not very cool, you know, whatever. And so you felt like you had to carry on that love in secret and all those kind of things. Now that's you getting shut down again in all different way again through peers, different ways shut down again. You weren't allowed to feel things there either. You weren't allowed to feel love now. You weren't allowed to feel like the joy of a developing relationship even anymore. Right? Now, the average person has had thousands of these experiences in their life, haven't they? Where this is shut down, that was shut down, this was shut down, you're not allowed to have this, not allowed to feel that, you have to feel this, but you can't feel that. All of those things have happened. So we've been, by the time we've become an adult, we've been well and truly indoctrinated into not loving ourselves. And in particular, not loving our emotions. Now what that causes is fragmentations of ourself. Right? You fragment parts of yourself off. So you learn that with my partner I have to act this way, but with my mum and dad I have to act that way. And then with my workmates I have to act that way. And when I'm with my, friends over here who all hate men, I have to act that way. And, I have to act certain ways. And so I start developing these fragments of myself where I'm that person with that person and a different person with that person. Now, of course, that's going to have some major impacts on the decisions and choices of my life in all sorts of circumstances. It makes it highly complex to disassemble all of that. It is complex to disassemble it. But the simplest way to disassemble it is to be prepared to love my emotion, whatever it is, and not have any judgment for it and have compassion for it and just go through it. That's the simplest way to disassemble it all. Right? Any other way won't work. Right? And yet we're told, don't do that either. Instead, take some medication for the problems that you have, or, take some antidepressants, or, what do you have here? Is it Zoloft and...
Yep. Ambien, Zoloft.
Okay, Ambien. Yeah, you even know the names of them. It's amazing, isn't it? So, we're educated, aren't we, to look for a physical solution to our problem, our spiritual problem, our love-based problems. And these are all love of self-based problems. It's not the fire, is it? Is it a fire?
That's some fire.
Just let it go.
It's the pet police.
Coming
To rescue them. Rescue pets from me. Yeah, so can you see that in that place, in answer to your question, yes, you do fragment yourself off. And you will find when you feel specific emotions that you will be at the age that they were stored when you go through them. Make sense?
And you asked about the spirits and whether or not you're experiencing spirits' feelings. There's not a definitive answer to, how do I say this? When you really want your feelings, you'll just be having your feelings. But in the process of developing humility, sometimes we don't want our feelings, and so we attract spirits who have their feelings through us. Or if we've been trained to take on the feelings of others
rather than our
own, sometimes we feel spirits' feelings.
Yep.
And if you really are set in your will to not have your own feelings, most of the feelings you'll feel will be spirits' feelings. So there's not a...
So the primary, I suppose you could say, principle is if you're humble, you won't be feeling other people's feelings.
Yeah.
But when you decide to not be humble, then of course you will start absorbing or feeling other people's feelings rather than your own.
Now, if you have an experience where you go, I don't know if that was my feelings or spirit's feelings, well, then you're going to learn, aren't you? You're not going to panic. If you panic, you realize, oh, that's me avoiding a fear. I need to feel the fear about this. And sometimes you might get to a point where you realize, oh, I thought I really wanted my feelings, but I was having spirit's feelings, and now I know what that feels like. It doesn't feel like me having my feelings,
and it doesn't feel a sense of relief from my feelings.
It will never feel relieving.
Because if you're always feeling someone else's feelings, can you see you're not going to relieve your own?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you are open and curious in the process, you understand what might be happening, and you're willing to keep developing your sincerity and humility, you'll come to a point where you understand, oh, that was Spirit's feelings, this is my feelings, I just want my feelings, I'm just going to have my feelings.
Yeah.
I guess, because we get this question, I suppose, and people freak out about the
But it's
spirits.
primarily because of the terror that you have about spirits.
That's what I'm saying. So you just need to feel your fear of that and know that God's laws protect you.
If you're sincere.
The more sincere you are, and the more you want your feelings, you'll have your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't need to worry so much about whether it's somebody else's or our own. What we need to do is focus on, am I actually humble to my own? That's what, am I sincere about feeling my own? Am I honest with myself that I want to feel my own? That's what we really need to focus our attention on. Yeah. Makes sense? So that is partially what's involved in loving yourself, right? Can you see there's very little link between that and that? Isn't there? So all the things that people think are loving themselves frequently aren't loving themselves. Yeah? So, you've got to remember too, and this is a fundamental principle, what are you? Soul. You are a soul. What is your soul? Is it your physical body?
No.
No. Not physical body. Is it your spirit body? No. So anything you choose to do to affect one of those bodies is not sorting out your soul. To love you, you have to learn to love your soul. Not as you love your soul, these bodies will automatically feel the benefits of you loving your soul. In other words, they will reduce in their diseases as a result of you loving your soul. Right? They will reduce in their sins, which will mean there's less penalty on them as you love your soul. We need to learn to love your soul. So to love your soul, you're going to have to learn what your soul is. Right? And you're going to have to learn to love your personality and your nature. So you've been taught, many of you from childhood, you've been taught to not like yourselves, not like your personality or nature. Or many of you have been taught by your mum and dad that you should have their personality and nature, or what they think your personality and nature is. Many of you have been taught all of that, right? So when you love your soul, you're prepared to look at and find your own personality and nature. Make sense to you?
So one of the things that the feedback that Mary gave me was to look at pretty much my life, do sort of like a review to find where I began to be dominant and
demanding
and demanding, sorry, that's the word I meant.
And arrogant.
And arrogant, exactly.
Yep.
And I did that. So I sort of.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, you've begun to do it in a very small way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
And actually my recommendation was not to do a life review, although that can help you, was to feel the emotions driving those demands.
Okay.
What am I trying to avoid through those demands?
Get to know yourself is what Mary was recommending.
Be sensitive to
Get to understand why you were doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyways, what I found, the way that I did it, which obviously was wrong, since
Yes.
clearly I don't know much about the truth,
Yeah.
was that when I went through my childhood, I could see that my mother, my sisters, 3 of them, and I was the only boy, the youngest, they all had that, right? And they used to this day my mother called me her prince.
Yeah.
So they gave me a lot of love where
Well, a lot of addiction was.
right,
Yeah.
where my life was really good, really happy, right?
Yeah.
Where even if I tried, I remember one instance I tried to mop the floor and they said to me, oh no, men don't do that, don't do it. So I was always catered for. So what I'm trying to say is that I feel like I truly never was in that situation and where I really was feeling the consequences of my actions, where I was truly humble, right? And in fact, even in my 2 previous relationships that I had, I continued doing a lot of that, and I was continuing to be catered. And it wasn't until I found the divine truth that I started making small changes based on my intellect and willpower. But now I understand that I really had no clue, because as you said, it wasn't
changing emotion.
Yeah, it wasn't changing in my emotions.
Yeah.
But so my question is, yes. So my question is, how do you then, when you know that that's all you know in your life, how do you fix it? Because you don't have a point where you could go, okay, I got it because of that emotion that happened when I was 10, so how do I deal with that emotion? I don't know where do I go?
You don't have to deal with the causal emotion. What you have to deal with is your sin.
Okay.
So this is where
what we talked about yesterday with Gerald is you already started in a small way to identify, I have feelings of entitlement.
Right.
I have feelings of superiority.
Yes.
I have feelings I should be praised. I have feelings I should get what I want. These are all you starting to identify your spiritual sins.
Right. Yeah. So now what you need to do is you need to go through the process of awareness into awakening to your spiritual sins. Then you will be in a state where you can ask God for forgiveness for those sins, and God will reach inside of you if you're sincere and deal with the thing that happened when you were 10, and the thing that happened when you were 6, and the thing that happened when you were 5. He will do that for you. What you've got to do is be prepared to see your sin clearly.
So I thought I did some of that last night, well maybe not. So
It's going to be a process. How old are you, Oz?
I'm 49, sorry.
So for 49 years, you've been living in these emotions.
Yeah. A lot of nasty stuff.
Yeah. We don't have to judge it.
Don't have to judge it.
It's
See,
not something
loving
to
yourself, would you go, yes, there was a lot of nasty stuff, but it's, you've got to have compassion for the fact that you didn't even hardly know what you were doing either, did you, at the time?
I didn't.
Yeah. And you've got to have compassion for that. But now you want to know what you're doing. And this is an improvement. God's feeling, Oz, it's great, you're now improving with your desire to even know that you're sinning. So he's happy with that. He's not happy when Oz was going, I don't sin, I'm great. Somebody else's problem. It's always somebody else's problem. He's not happy there. But when he feels Oz has a direct desire to look at himself and find his own sin, now God's going, I can help now. I can help you through this process. Now, God can tell you even through the conscience what every one of them is. But of course, when you're very steeped in your sin, a lot of times, as we've seen, you don't really even want to know what they are. And remember the feeling we had earlier with the pets and everything. You don't want to even feel about it. There's this anger and resistance and judgment about, looking at what the loving thing might be, even on simple issues. Imagine how it's going to be with issues that are our very life and our very, that our whole heart loves. It's going to be pretty tough, right? And to get from awareness, which is where you're starting at, to awakening is going to be a process. And you're not going to be over it in one night. You want to be over it in one night.
No, I know you can't, because my whole life I've been doing that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And also, it's not only that it's your whole life, but also during your formulating years, your entire brain and every way you were wired, emotionally wired and intellectually wired through this process was affected by the education you had. Right? So you're already, you could say it's like a runaway train.
Reprogramming, that's what I call it.
That's right, it is in a lot of ways. It's a runaway train that you're going to have to learn how to stop and then push backwards. Right?
And pushing back only happens through feeling.
That's right. Yeah. It only happens through going through the feelings. So you're going to have to learn how to stop the sin, and you're going to have to learn, in other words, not continue to engage it. Because every time you continue to engage it, you're just living in the addiction of the sin. Right? So even today, even in your questions, you're still engaging the same sin, right? And I'm not saying your questions are the sin, it's the feeling you have about it that is the sin. So now what's developing is even a fear about dealing with things in a that might take you the next 10 years to do. Many of you, when I say to you, like the average person who hears divine truth, takes 15 years to become aware of the fact that they sin in an emotional manner. Normally takes the average person around 15 years to do that, right? So when you hear that, you go, 15 years, like 48, 15, 62, like 63, what? Like I'm not going to be 63 until I've like aware of how I sin, like, and most people when they hear that, they get in a panic. They go, but I want it faster, I need it faster. Well, it's going to be as fast as you make it, but it's also going to take some time, and you're going to have some compassion, and you're going to have some dedication about doing it. Like I've said to you, I've been doing it for 28 years, right? So 15 is not very long.
No, at least intellectually, I feel that this is a process for you, the rest of your life, right? It's for the rest of your existence.
Well, no, it's not, because your sin is, you're going to get to a point where you no longer have any.
Right.
So, fortunately, because otherwise it would be the rest of your life, right? No, what happens is that when you become dedicated to dealing with it, you'll find it's like emptying a bucket. Imagine you've got a bucket full of water, and I just tip it a little bit, and just a drip comes out. So let's imagine the bucket of water is my sin. So I just tip it a little bit, and the drip comes out, and I go, that's enough now for this year. Right?
I need a chocolate.
I need to commit a few other sins now to compensate. Now, if you commit more sin, obviously the bucket's going to get more full of water. You follow? But let's say I've got to. You can see I've got to stop pouring water in. So in other words, I've got to stop pouring the sin in. In other words, I've got to stop my sin, whatever way I can. Right? So if I notice one, stop doing it. Right? That helps. But there's all this sin inside of me that is all about beliefs and feelings, and there's a link between my beliefs and my feelings. And if I just tip out a little tiny drip of feelings once a year, and I've got a bucket full, then obviously it's going to take me like thousands of years probably to empty the bucket, right? But if I'm prepared to actually like tip the bucket so that it's always flowing, can you see it's not going to take that many years and the bucket's going to be empty, right? And in particular, if I stop putting new sin in, because you can imagine you're tipping out a sin, but you're putting a new one in. You're tipping out a sin. Can you see under those circumstances, it's going to be like a never-ending thing, isn't it, that you'll feel? But if you can tip out the sin and pray for love, then you'll get into a higher state of love that's more in harmony with God. And as a result of that, you'll be less inclined to sin again, right? So you will actually stop the tipping in the sin into the bucket. And by tipping it out, in other words, being prepared to go through the discovery, awareness, right the way through to awakening and repentance for your sin, then you're going to have the bucket empty. Once the bucket's empty of your sin, there's no more sin. It's not a never-ending process.
Well, when I said never-ending, I meant going through the spheres. Right? It's always a process of improvement. That's what I meant by
yeah, but even that is not true.
Okay.
Because you get to a stage where you have no fear.
Spheres, he said spheres.
It's spheres.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. But you get to a stage where you've got to the stage where you're now at one with God. Now, every bit of progress is a joy. It's not a, when you're dealing with your sin, it's oftentimes because there's a lot of judgment of your sin, there's a lot of criticism of it, there's a lot of internal guilt, there's a lot of bad feelings, shame, and other feelings that you're going to have to feel. And so it's a lot of times. And you get to a point where it's not anymore, but you still feel like desirous now. Oh, you beauty, I found another thing. And isn't that great? I found another thing, and another thing, and another thing. This is good, this is good. So you get to that stage where you love the truth, of who you've become, even though there's sin in it. And in that place, now you'll go faster. Because now you're not resisting everything, right? Now you're proactively enjoying the process of growth. You follow? Yeah. So you go faster. So you're tipping out the bucket faster, right? Then you get to a point where you're sort of like in a wonder about the whole thing. It's like, man, it's amazing. Like in this process, I'm also discovering myself and discovering whom I really am and my nature. And so the weight of the sin gets to the stage where, even though you still got sin, it's all the things you're now discovering that now are driving your further actions in order to improve. And of course now you're getting close to the point, and if you're receiving God's love, you're getting close to one with God. But if you're not receiving God's love, you're getting close to that sixth sphere state where you're happy.
Right.
And happiness improves as you do this. So that's the process that happens. But it's very dependent upon you continuing to tip the sin out. Right? And so the people who become the most frustrated in this process are the people who tip a bit of sin out and they let some in. Tip a bit out, put some in, tip a bit out, put some in. Because the net result is 0. Okay. And then after 15 years of 0, what do you feel? Disappointed. Angry. Right?
Could I ask a follow-up question on that point?
Sure.
Of putting a little bit of sin in. So after finding divine truth, I try to become vegan.
Yeah.
But instead I become vegetarian. So
can I stop you straight away? The fact that you tried, you hadn't dealt with your sin.
So I'll explain, and that's my question about. So I eat eggs, right?
Yep.
So the way I justify it, I feel like I need protein, and I know you mentioned that before. So the way I justify it is I buy eggs that are from small family farms instead of.
Is this going to be a question about eggs? No.
Oh.
Yeah, could you
I don't need to hear
get
the story. You're not getting the point of what I just said. You didn't deal with it emotionally. What you've heard is you've tried, you're going, yes, I can logically see that, eating meat is bad for the animals and so forth, and I can logically see that there's things wrong with it, so I'm going to try to change. That's not a soul change. That's an intellectual change. And remember I said at the beginning of this discussion, intellectual changes do not work. So what you've got to do is go further with the emotional change with regard to the eating of meat, if you're going to change anything.
Well, that's what I want to change.
Yeah, I understand there's a desire, but what I'm saying is, the fact is, the desire to eat the eggs shows you that the desire is not sincere. Right? Now, there's a reason why it's not sincere, and you've got to discover it. Now, that reason is you're worried about your health.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
So your fear of your health is the reason why you are sacrificing the truth. So you need to deal with that emotionally.
So I have high blood pressure, right?
That's it, Oz. It's like, you're not getting the principle.
And actually, you're not sensitive to the sin you're engaging right now.
That's right.
You feel angry.
You're now being quite selfish as well for the whole group.
Yeah. And because we're not letting you tell the story, you get angry. And because we're not meeting your demands. So. Yeah. If you understand the principles I'm teaching you, you'll be able to apply that everywhere. At this stage, you don't understand the principle yet. You think you do, but you don't. And so what I'm saying, spend more time thinking about the discussion over the last 3 days. Listen to it again if you get the opportunity. And let yourself work through the principles associated with change rather than just making an intellectual decision to change. I know you want to change, but there are certain things emotionally you don't want to change. And that's what's going, that's where the work is. Make sense?
Of course.
Yep. Emma.
I was just going to mention that out in Australia you gave some really good talks on personal responsibility and sincerity and sensitivity and all of these topics that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And they're on YouTube now if people wanted to get more detail about those things. And I was also going to say it's probably lunchtime.
Oh yes, what's the time?
It's 10 to 2.
Yeah, so I think the best course of action, I think we'll finish the conversation we were having about, does everyone, I want to refer back to the love of self thing, because that was the point of this morning.
Yeah.
Can everyone see that the way we often design our lives is in this concept that we're loving ourselves, but actually we're using love of self as an excuse to commit more sin. You see that? And the true love of self is to actually develop in the principles associated with love, truth, humility and faith. That's when you start to really love yourself properly, when you do that. So that's what I would encourage all of you to do, to develop your understanding of those principles, right? And to do that for yourself personally, not for anyone else or not because anyone else told you, but because you want to for yourself. You see, for you to be sincere, it's going to have to be you want it for you. Not because you were told, not because it was suggested, not because, you think you're bad if you don't do it. It's not because you think you're great if you do it. None of that. It's going to have to be you're sincere because you want this for yourself. You want change for yourself. And you want to become a more loving person. Right? And that's what's going to motivate your change. Having faith that you can become a more loving person. Right? And that's probably what I'd like to leave you with before lunch. So what we'll do now is we'll come back at 20 past 2 and we'll just have a discussion about plans and other less important things. Go on, Matt. Just wait for everyone to go.
Sorry, I just wanted to, could we also add like an example with children in all this? Because sometimes when you have children, self-love, like it looks slightly different. I would say.
I don't think it does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Okay.
It's exactly the same, yes.
Okay.
And so we have talked about it with others at other times, so
Oh, okay. So
we
maybe
probably
it's-
won't have the time to do that today.
Yeah. When did we talk about that too? Is that on this trip?
Many times, I guess.
Yeah, many times.
That's last weekend.
Just hang on a second, right? Hey, can I just stop all of you? You're all very disrespectful. Just stop for a moment. Just wait till we're done. Then you can go. Right. Can
No,
we
I said
finish?
then I'm going to listen to the videos from last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but after this, after now, we're going to discuss other matters.
Yep.
Yep. So you're all good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing I've noticed with this group is that we often are continuing talking, and you're often off talking with yourself and doing other things, and that's quite disrespectful of Mary and I, to be honest, and our time. And so, can you please deal with that? It's a sin. Please deal with it. We're not very attracted to groups who are disrespectful to us. Can you understand?
Yes.
And you can see why, surely. Because we feel like, well, if you can't, even stay quiet until we're done, then something's wrong, isn't it? You obviously don't want to be here. Now, I know you're hungry and I know you need to go to the toilet and all those things, and we should have probably finished earlier, but partly it's because of your questions that we've gone this long. And partly it's because of your fears that we've gone this long, right? And this is what I've noticed with this group and many other groups in the past, is that we end up raising issues which your fear is triggered, and in the process of your fear getting triggered, you then automatically forget the loving principles, right? And this is a problem that you face in your day-to-day life. It's an example of why you become unloving, because when your fear gets triggered, you then justify it, and then unloving behaviour results. Yep. Yeah. So it's just a thing in practice that where unloving behaviour results, and it happens without even anybody really thinking about it.
And it's a product of your sin fighting for yourself when you want a particular answer just on that particular issue. And one day in your future, and I say this not to make you feel embarrassed or ashamed or anything, but one day in your future, you'll look back on this day and you'll think, wow, I really wanted to talk about veganism or pets, and actually Jesus was trying to teach me the principle that would help me solve every little issue in my life.
Yeah.
And
the highest principles in the universe is what I'm trying to share with you.
Yeah. And once I grasped those principles, all those other little things felt very easy to deal with and insignificant. So it's just something to remember, that if you get the principle and if you get the relationship with God, a lot of these things, you'll just feel your feelings about them. You'll feel your fear, you feel your panic, you feel your worry, you feel your shame, your sadness, whatever, and it will be solved.
And if you're still asking questions about the details, it means you didn't understand the principle. And this is something that each of you need to come to grasp. Is that if you're still questioning the detail, like whether about the vegan or the this little thing or that little thing or the pets or the how do I treat my children and how whatever, if you're still questioning the detail, then it means the principle isn't solid yet inside of you. Because once it becomes solid, you won't need the details, because the principle will govern every detail. Does that make sense to all of you? So this is why it's so important you focus on the principles and try to get over your terror about the details and focus on the principles in your life. And do it everywhere in your life, the principle. So getting up when people are still talking, there's a principle. Lack of respect, there's a principle there. So if you were sensitive to the principle, you wouldn't do it anymore. Can you see? It wouldn't happen. And this is what we need to bear in mind. The principles are the important things. Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's have lunch now.
Thank you.